Imagine a nation born in a single day, surrounded by enemies who vowed to wipe it from the map before the ink on its declaration could even dry. This was Israel in 1948. But while the world watched its armies fight in the desert, a far more dangerous weapon was being forged in the shadows, an agency so secret its very existence was a state secret, its mission to ensure survival by any means necessary. This is the story of how Mossad was born. If you're ready to uncover the truth behind the world's most secretive intelligence agency, hit subscribe and join us in the shadows. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? Your engagement helps us bring you more untold stories. The birth of Israel in May 1948 represented both a triumph and a catastrophe. For Jewish survivors of the Holocaust, it offered a long-awaited sanctuary. For the Palestinian people, it marked the beginning of the Nakba, the catastrophic displacement that would see over 700,000 people forced from their homes. This fundamental tension created immediate hostilities that would shape the region for decades to come. Into this volatile landscape stepped David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, who recognized that conventional military strength alone could not guarantee the nation's survival. He envisioned an organization that could operate in the spaces between war and peace, in the shadows, where traditional rules did not apply. The early architects of Israeli intelligence faced unimaginable challenges. They operated from borrowed offices with minimal budgets, relying on ingenuity rather than infrastructure. The first recruits came from diverse backgrounds: former partisans who had fought Nazis in European forests, linguists fluent in Arab dialects, and idealists willing to disappear into deep cover for years at a time. These pioneers developed innovative techniques for intelligence gathering, often inventing methods on the spot as they confronted each new crisis. They established networks of informants, created clandestine communication systems, and learned to navigate the complex political landscapes of hostile nations. Mossad's creation formalized what had begun as scattered intelligence efforts. The agency's first director established 3 fundamental principles that would guide its operations for decades. Operate globally rather than regionally, maintain absolute secrecy in all operations, and prioritize preventive action over reactive response. These principles represented a radical departure from conventional intelligence gathering and signaled Israel's intent to defend itself through unconventional means. The agency's motto, "By way of deception thou shalt make war," perfectly captured its operational philosophy. The early years saw Mossad focused on 2 critical objectives: monitoring Arab military movements and facilitating Jewish immigration from hostile territories. The latter mission, known as Aliyabet, involved extracting Jewish communities from Yemen, Iraq, and other Arab states, where they faced increasing persecution after Israel's establishment. These operations required intricate planning, with agents establishing secret routes and safe houses across the Middle East. One of Mossad's first major successes came through Operation Magic Carpet, which transported nearly 50,000 Yemeni Jews to Israel between 1949 and 1950. The mission involved coordinating airlifts through difficult terrain while avoiding detection by hostile governments, demonstrating Mossad's ability to execute complex logistical operations under challenging circumstances. As the agency grew more confident, its operations became increasingly ambitious. Mossad agents established networks in Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, often operating under commercial cover as businessmen or academics. They developed sophisticated intelligence-gathering techniques, including dead drops in crowded markets and communications through seemingly innocent commercial radio transmissions. The agency began recruiting assets within Arab governments and military establishments, building networks that would provide crucial intelligence during times of crisis. These early successes established patterns that would characterize Mossad operations for years to come. Meticulous planning, innovative methods, and willingness to take calculated risks. The early 1950s saw Mossad evolve from an intelligence-gathering organization into an active instrument of foreign policy. The agency began conducting sabotage operations against military infrastructure in neighboring countries, targeting weapons, depots, and transportation routes used by hostile forces. These operations were designed to degrade enemy capabilities while maintaining plausible deniability. Mossad's growing capabilities did not go unnoticed, and Arab intelligence services began developing countermeasures, leading to a shadow war that would span decades. The agency suffered its first significant setback in 1954 when a sabotage operation in Egypt went disastrously wrong, resulting in the capture and public trial of Israeli agents. The incident, known as the Lavon Affair, forced a re-evaluation of operational protocols and brought increased scrutiny to Mossad's activities. Despite this failure, Mossad continued to expand its reach and capabilities. The agency established liaison relationships with intelligence services in Europe and Asia, exchanging information and coordinating on matters of mutual interest. These relationships would prove invaluable in the coming years as Mossad's operations became increasingly global in scope. By the mid-1950s, Mossad had transformed from a fledgling organization into a sophisticated intelligence service with agents operating on 5 continents. The agency had developed specialized units for assassination, sabotage, and psychological operations, each trained to operate with maximum deniability. The foundation had been laid for what would become one of the world's most formidable intelligence agencies. But greater challenges lay ahead. The emergence of former Nazi scientists helping develop advanced weapons systems in Egypt presented an unprecedented threat that would require all the skills and resources Mossad had developed during its formative years. The silent war was about to begin, and its opening moves would shock the world. The next chapter will reveal how Mossad confronted this unprecedented threat through a campaign of intimidation and violence that crossed international borders and challenged conventional notions of sovereignty. If you think this beginning was explosive, wait until you see what happens when Mossad goes on the offensive. Next, we are going to reveal the secret war against Nazi scientists in Egypt, a campaign that redefined modern intelligence operations. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on so you don't miss it. The year was 1951. In a quiet Munich neighborhood, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s stepped out of his Mercedes-Benz. Dr. Heinz Krug, a brilliant aeronautical engineer, checked his watch as he walked toward his office. He never noticed the 2 men watching from across the street, their faces obscured by newspapers. They had been tracking his movements for weeks, learning his routines, his habits, his vulnerabilities. As Dr. Krug reached for his office door, one of the men nodded almost imperceptibly. The silent war had just claimed its first casualty, and the world would never know what happened until it was too late. If you're enjoying this journey into the shadows, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. The early 1950s marked a dramatic escalation in Mossad's operations. Having established its basic intelligence networks during its formative years, the agency now faced its first truly existential crisis, one that would test its capabilities and morality in ways its founders could never have anticipated. The threat emerged from an unexpected quarter. Egypt, under the charismatic leadership of Gamal Abdel Nasser, had begun recruiting former Nazi scientists to develop advanced weapons systems capable of striking Israeli population centers. This development represented more than just a military threat, was psychological warfare of the highest order. For a nation founded by Holocaust survivors, the idea that the very scientists who had worked for Hitler were now building weapons for their destruction was unimaginably terrifying. Mossad received its orders directly from Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion. Stop these scientists by any means necessary. Thus began Operation Damocles, a campaign of intimidation, sabotage, and assassination that would span continents and redefine the boundaries of covert warfare. The operation represented Mossad's coming of age. Unlike previous missions focused on intelligence gathering or facilitating immigration, this required offensive action on foreign soil against protected targets. The agency established a special unit called Caesarea, consisting of operatives specifically trained for overseas missions. These agents were masters of disguise, linguistics, and tradecraft, the best Israel had to offer. They operated in small cells, each member knowing only what was necessary for their specific part of the mission, creating a system of compartmentalization that would become standard Mossad practice. Dr. Wolfgang Pils, a former Peenemünde rocket scientist, emerged as one of the primary targets. He had assembled a team of German engineers in Egypt, working on surface-to-surface missiles that could reach Tel Aviv. Mossad's approach was methodical and psychological. They began with warning letters sent to the scientists' homes in Germany and Egypt, but firm messages suggesting they abandon their work. When these warnings went unheeded, the operation escalated dramatically. The campaign of intimidation became increasingly sophisticated. Operatives would make late-night phone calls to the scientists' families, mentioning specific details about their children's schools or wives' shopping habits. Packages would arrive containing sophisticated but non-lethal devices that demonstrated Mossad's ability to reach them anywhere. One scientist received a book about Nazi war crimes with certain passages highlighted in red passages that mentioned his own work during the war. The operation reached its climax with a series of targeted actions that demonstrated Mossad's growing capabilities. In 1962, a mysterious explosion destroyed the Egyptian missile factory where the German scientists worked. The blast was attributed to electrical faults in official reports, but intelligence agencies throughout the region understood the message. Several scientists abruptly resigned their positions and returned to Europe, citing family reasons that everyone understood meant they had received Mossad's message. Not all operations ended cleanly. The case of Dr. Heinz Krug, who disappeared in Munich in 1962, remains shrouded in mystery. Egyptian sources claimed he was kidnapped by Mossad and interrogated before being eliminated. German police investigations reached dead ends, with witnesses suddenly recanting statements and evidence mysteriously disappearing. The Krug case demonstrated Mossad's willingness to operate aggressively even in friendly European nations, a precedent that would have significant diplomatic repercussions. The psychological impact of Operation Damocles cannot be overstated. For the first time, Arab governments understood that Israel could reach their most valuable assets anywhere in the world. The operation created an atmosphere of paranoia among foreign technicians working in Arab states, making recruitment more difficult and expensive. It also established Mossad's reputation for ruthless efficiency, reputation that would both help and haunt the agency in coming years. Meanwhile, Mossad faced growing challenges on other fronts. The agency's traditional intelligence-gathering operations were becoming increasingly mixed complex as Arab states improved their own security services. Mossad responded by developing more sophisticated recruitment techniques, using a combination of ideological persuasion, financial incentives, and blackmail to turn Arab officials. The most prized recruits were often motivated by disillusionment with their governments or personal grievances rather than ideology. Pattern Mossad would exploit repeatedly. The agency also began developing what would become its most valuable asset, signals intelligence. Mossad established Unit 8200, dedicated to electronic surveillance and code breaking. Initially equipped with primitive equipment by modern standards, the unit quickly demonstrated remarkable ingenuity, intercepting diplomatic communications and military transmissions that provided crucial early warning of potential threats. This technological edge would become increasingly important as the region moved toward another major conflict. By the mid-1950s, Mossad had established itself as a formidable intelligence service, but it remained relatively small compared to its counterparts in larger nations. What it lacked in size, it made up for in agility, creativity, and willingness to take risks that larger bureaucracies would avoid. The agency developed a unique operational culture that emphasized individual initiative within a framework of strict discipline, a combination that would produce both spectacular successes and catastrophic failures. The period also saw Mossad developing its relationships with other intelligence services, particularly those of France and West Germany. These relationships were based on mutual interest rather than affection. European services valued Mossad's intelligence on Soviet activities in the Middle East, while Israel gained access to technical expertise and diplomatic cover. These partnerships would prove crucial in the coming years as Mossad's operations became increasingly global in scope. Operation Damocles finally wound down in 1963, having achieved its primary objective. Most of the German scientists had left Egypt, and the missile program had been significantly delayed. But the operation's legacy extended far beyond its immediate tactical success. It established patterns of behavior and operational methodologies that would characterize Mossad activities for decades to come. The agency had demonstrated its willingness to operate aggressively outside Israel's borders. Its ability to conduct complex operations in denied areas, and its ruthless efficiency in eliminating threats. The silent war had begun in earnest, and Mossad had served notice that it would fight this war without rules or boundaries. The agency's success in Operation Damocles emboldened Israeli leadership to authorize increasingly ambitious operations that would soon make the scientist intimidation campaign look like child's play. As the 1960s progressed, Mossad would find itself involved in everything from regime change operations to counter-terrorism missions that would test its capabilities to their limits. The next chapter will explore how Mossad's success against the German scientists led to even more ambitious operations, including the hunt for one of history's most notorious war criminals. The agency was about to demonstrate that it could not only protect Israel's present, but also bring justice for its past. The world would watch in amazement as Mossad pulled off one of the most audacious operations in intelligence history. Asterisk, if you think the operation against the German scientists was dramatic, wait until you see what happens when Mossad turns its attention to hunting Nazi war criminals. Now we will reveal the incredible story of how Israel tracked down one of the architects of the Holocaust and the moral questions this operation raised. Make sure you're subscribed so we bring more best spy stories. What would you do if you discovered your enemies were building weapons that could wipe your cities off the map? And what if the architects of these weapons were the very same scientists who once worked for Hitler? This wasn't a theoretical question for Israel in the early 1960s. It was their terrifying reality. The hot Egyptian wind whipped across the desert compound where dozens of German scientists worked tirelessly under the North African sun. Inside reinforced concrete buildings, these men, some of whom had once developed V-2 rockets for Nazi Germany, were now designing missiles for Gamal Abdel Nasser's Egypt. Their project had a clear objective: create weapons that could reach every major Israeli city. For a nation founded by Holocaust survivors, the symbolism was as devastating as the potential destruction. How does a small nation confront such a threat without triggering all-out war? This was the dilemma facing Israeli intelligence in 1962. Conventional military strikes were impossible, the facilities were too well protected, and the political consequences would be catastrophic. Instead, Israel would fight this battle in the shadows through a campaign of psychological warfare and precision strikes that would become known as Operation Damocles. The operation began not with explosions, but with envelopes. Neat, professional letters began arriving at the German scientists' homes in Egypt and Europe. The messages were polite but firm. Your current work threatens the peace of the Middle East. We suggest you reconsider your employment arrangements. Some letters included detailed schedules of the scientists' families, their children's school routes, their wives' shopping habits, and their weekend activities. The message was clear: we are watching, and we can reach you anywhere. When gentle persuasion failed, Mossad's tactics escalated dramatically. One scientist received a book about Nazi war crimes with certain passages, highlighted passages that specifically mentioned his own work during the war. Another found his car wired with a sophisticated but non-lethal explosive device that detonated when he turned the ignition, leaving him shaken but unharmed. The psychological impact was precisely calculated: demonstrate capability without creating martyrs. But why would German scientists work for Egypt in the first place? The answer lay in a complex web of money, ideology, and second chances. After World War II, many Nazi scientists found themselves unemployed and unemployable. Egypt offered generous salaries, excellent facilities, and a chance to continue their work without judgment. For some, there was also ideological sympathy. Nasser's brand of Arab nationalism appealed to those who had embraced Nazi ideology. The most prominent figure was Wolfgang Pils, a former Peenemünde rocket scientist who had worked on the V-2 program. Under his leadership, the Egyptian missile program advanced at an alarming rate. By 1962, intelligence reports indicated they were developing missiles with ranges of up to 400 miles, enough to strike Tel Aviv from Egyptian territory. The program even had a name: Project 135. How did Mossad respond to this accelerating threat? They established a special unit called Caesarea, consisting of operatives specifically trained for overseas missions. These agents were masters of disguise, linguistics, and tradecraft, the best Israel had to offer. They operated in small cells, each member knowing only what was necessary for their specific part of the mission, creating a system of compartmentalization that protected the larger operation if any individual were captured. The campaign reached its dramatic climax on September 27, 1962. A package arrived at the Munich office of Heinz Krug, a key recruiter for the Egyptian program. When his secretary opened it, the explosion tore through the office, injuring her severely. The same day, in Switzerland, another scientist's car was rigged with explosives that detonated when he started the engine. He survived, but the message was delivered. Nowhere was safe. Perhaps the most audacious operation occurred in broad daylight in a European city. 5 Mossad agents tracked a senior scientist to a hotel, subdued him in his room, and injected him with a powerful sedative. They then dressed him as a drunk friend and carried him past hotel staff into a waiting vehicle. He was interrogated for days at a safe house before being released, a thoroughly terrified man who immediately resigned from the Egyptian program. But what were the moral calculations behind these operations? Within Mossad's headquarters, heated debates raged about the ethics of targeting civilians, even those working on weapons systems. Some argued that the scientists were legitimate military targets. They were designing instruments of war that would kill thousands. Others worried about the precedent being set and the potential backlash if operations went wrong. The tension between operational effectiveness and moral boundaries would become a recurring theme in Mossad's history. In the case of Operation Damocles, the practical considerations ultimately prevailed. As one former operative later explained, when faced with a choice between our citizens dying or their scientists being frightened, the choice was clear. The operation's success wasn't measured in bodies but in resignations. One by one, the German scientists began leaving Egypt. Some cited family reasons, others health concerns, but the intelligence communities knew the truth. The missile program slowed to a crawl as key personnel departed and replacement became impossible to recruit. Who would want to work under constant threat of assassination? By 1963, Operation Damocles had effectively achieved its objectives. The Egyptian missile program had been set back by years, and the immediate threat to Israeli cities had diminished. But the operation's legacy extended far beyond its tactical success. It established Mossad's reputation for ruthless efficiency and demonstrated Israel's willingness to take extraordinary measures to ensure its survival. The operation also had unintended consequences. It alerted Arab intelligence services to Mossad's capabilities, prompting them to improve their own security and counterintelligence measures. It created diplomatic tensions with West Germany, where many of the operations took place, and it established patterns of behavior that would sometimes lead Mossad into trouble when operations were less carefully planned. Looking back, was Operation Damocles justified? Supporters point to the very real threat posed by missiles that could have delivered chemical or conventional warheads against Israeli cities. They argue that the operation prevented countless civilian casualties and may have deterred Egypt from pursuing even more aggressive weapons programs. Critics, however, note that many of the scientists were primarily engineers rather than ideological warriors, technicians who saw themselves as apolitical professionals. Some question whether the missile program was as advanced as Israeli intelligence feared. suggesting that the threat may have been exaggerated to justify extreme measures. What's undeniable is that Operation Damocles marked a turning point in Middle Eastern intelligence operations. It demonstrated that the conflict between Israel and its neighbors would be fought not just on battlefields, but in European cities, through psychological operations and targeted strikes. The rules of engagement had changed forever. As the last of the German scientists packed their bags and left Egypt, a new threat was emerging on Israel's northern border. Palestinian Fedayeen fighters were launching cross-border raids with increasing frequency and sophistication. Mossad's attention would soon turn to this new challenge, and the methods developed during Operation Damocles would be applied to a very different kind of enemy. But that's a story for another time. For now, consider this. In the shadow war between intelligence agencies, how far is too far? When does defense become aggression? And where should the lines be drawn in protecting a nation's survival? These questions would continue to haunt Mossad through decades of operations to come. What do you think about the methods used in Operation Damocles? Could there have been another way to address the threat? Or were these extreme measures justified by the extreme danger? The answers to these questions may say as much about our own moral compass as they do about the difficult choices faced by intelligence agencies in life-or-death situations. The morning of September 5, 1972, dawned bright and clear over the Olympic Village in Munich. The world was watching the games, watching young athletes achieve their dreams. But in the early hours, while athletes slept, 8 figures dressed in tracksuits scaled the fence. They carried duffel bags, and inside those bags were AK-47s. They headed straight for Building 31, where the Israeli team was housed. What began as a day of peace and sport instantly became a nightmare. The world watched in real time as Black September terrorists took 11 Israeli athletes hostage. The demand was simple: released 234 prisoners held in Israeli jails. The world held its breath, waiting for a negotiation that would never come. But in Tel Aviv, in a secure underground facility, the response was already being formulated, and it would not involve negotiation. Golda Meir, Israel's prime minister, delivered the verdict that would define a generation of intelligence operations. We must send our boys. The message was clear. There would be no bargaining with terrorists. The world might see this as a tragedy. Israel saw it as an act of war, and war demanded a response. The subsequent German rescue attempt at Fürstenfeldbruck Air Base ended in catastrophic failure. The world watched on television as a botched operation led to the death of all 11 hostages. The images were seared into the global consciousness. Masked terrorists on balconies, the anxious face of a negotiator, and finally, the horrific climax at the airfield. In Israel, the grief was immeasurable, but it was quickly forged into a cold, hard resolve. The message from the government was absolute. This would not stand. For Mossad, the directive was unprecedented in its scope and ruthlessness. They were to hunt down and eliminate every person involved in the planning, execution, and support of the Munich massacre. The operation was given a name that left no room for misinterpretation: Operation Wrath of God. How do you find people who don't want to be found? People who vanish into the shadows of the Middle East and Europe. Mossad's first task was to build a list, not just the 8 terrorists who had been killed or captured in Munich, but the planners, the financiers, the logistics men. The names were compiled into a secret ledger, Deadliest, approved at the highest levels of the Israeli government. The hit teams, known as Katzes, were drawn from the elite Caesarea unit. They were granted extraordinary powers, license to kill, vast resources, and absolute deniability. Their motto was simple: let the world know, let them know, and be afraid. The first target was Wal Zaider, a Palestinian intellectual and cousin of Yasser Arafat, who was identified as the mastermind behind the Munich operation. He was shot 11 times in the lobby of his Rome apartment building, one bullet for each Israeli athlete. The operation was clean, clinical, and brutal. The message was sent, but was this justice or vengeance? The question echoed through the halls of Mossad. Some agents saw it as a moral duty, a necessary act to deter future terrorism. Others wrestled with the conscience of becoming judge, jury, and executioner. They were no longer just intelligence gatherers. They were instruments of state-sanctioned retribution. The hunt stretched from the crowded refugee camps of Beirut to the quiet streets of European capitals. In Paris, Mahmoud Hamshari, the PLO's representative in France, was killed by a bomb planted in his telephone. The device was triggered remotely when he answered a call that confirmed his identity. The technical precision was terrifying. In Cyprus, Hussein al-Bashir, another key planner, died when his hotel bed exploded in the middle of the night. The explosives were so carefully placed that the room above and below remained untouched. Mossad's operations relied on a sophisticated network of Syanim, Jewish volunteers living abroad who provided everything from apartment keys to rental cars without asking questions. This network gave Mossad eyes and ears everywhere, creating a web of support that made their agents nearly invisible. But the pressure to succeed was immense. The teams operated under constant stress, knowing that any mistake could mean exposure, diplomatic scandal, or death. They lived under false identities, cut off from families and friends, their real lives erased. The psychological toll was devastating. How long can you live a lie before you forget who you really are? The operation's most controversial moment came in the small Norwegian town of Lillehammer. Acting on flawed intelligence, a hit team ambushed a man they believed was Ali Hassan Salam, the Red Prince and chief of Black September. They shot him multiple times in front of his pregnant wife. The man was Ahmed Bouchiki, an innocent Moroccan waiter. He had no connection to terrorism whatsoever. The Lillehammer affair was a disaster. Norwegian police arrested 6 Mossad operatives. The ensuing trial exposed Mossad's methods to the world, revealing the use of forged passports, surveillance techniques, and the Syanim network. The global sympathy Israel had enjoyed after Munich evaporated, replaced by condemnation. The hunters had become the hunted. Back in Israel, the failure prompted a painful reckoning. Had the operation gone too far? Had the thirst for vengeance compromised their judgment? The debate raged in secret. Some argued that the mistake, while tragic, did not invalidate the entire mission. The message of deterrence was still being received in Palestinian circles. Others feared that Mossad had lost its moral compass, becoming the very thing it sought to destroy. The operation continued for years, its list growing shorter. But the cost was etched on the soul of the agency. The wrath of God had not been a clean, divine strike. It was messy, human, and morally complex. It showed that in the shadows, the line between justice and revenge is often blurred beyond recognition. The world moved on, but Mossad did not. The lessons of Munich and its aftermath would shape its approach to counter-terrorism for decades. The era of simple retaliation was over. The next threats would require more than a gun and a list. They would require cunning, patience, and a willingness to operate in the grayest areas of morality. And the next threat was already emerging, one that would come not from a terrorist cell, but from a nuclear reactor in the heart of an enemy nation. The stakes were about to get much, much higher. The phone call to the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem was brief and devastating. "They have taken a plane," the voice on the secure line said. "An Air France flight from Tel Aviv to Paris. It has been hijacked." On June 27, 1976, Air France Flight 139, with 248 passengers aboard, was seized by 2 Palestinians from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and 2 Germans from the Revolutionary Cells. After refueling in Libya, the giant Airbus was forced to land at Entebbe Airport in Uganda, a nation whose dictator, Idi Amin, had openly aligned himself with the Palestinians. The passengers were herded into the old terminal building. Then came the selection. The non-Israeli passengers were released and flown to safety. The 106 Jewish passengers were kept behind as hostages. The terrorists' demands were stark. The release of 53 prisoners, most held in Israeli jails, or the hostages would be executed. In Jerusalem, the new Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, faced an impossible decision. Negotiate with terrorists and invite more attacks, or launch a military operation over 2,500 miles away in the heart of Africa against a hostile regime with near impossible odds of success. What would you do when every option seems wrong? When the lives of your citizens hang in the balance and the whole world is watching? Mossad's first task was intelligence, and they had almost nothing. What was the layout of the terminal? How many terrorists were there? How were they armed? What about Ugandan soldiers? Were they helping the hijackers? The clock was ticking. Then, a miracle. An Israeli architect who had worked on the Entebbe terminal years earlier still had the blueprints. He rushed them to military intelligence. Meanwhile, Israeli spies in Africa began feeding information about Ugandan military deployments, released hostages, debriefed in Paris, provided crucial details about the number of terrorists, their weapons, and their routines. The picture that emerged was terrifying. The terrorists were well organized. They had the full cooperation of Idi Amin's military. The hostages were being held in a large hall, guarded by armed men who had threatened to start killing them. The Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, began planning a mission that everyone thought was suicidal. How do you fly for large transport planes undetected into the heart of Africa? How do you storm a terminal, neutralize terrorists, and rescue over 100 hostages without them being massacred? And how do you get out alive? The plan was audacious beyond belief. C-130 Hercules transport planes would fly the entire distance at extremely low altitude to avoid radar detection. They would land at night on a runway that might be blocked. Israeli commandos would roll out in a black Mercedes and to Land Rover's a perfect replica of Idi Amin's motorcade to achieve momentary surprise. The rescue itself would take place in 90 seconds. 90 seconds to storm the terminal, identify and kill the terrorists, and get the hostages to the planes. Every second beyond that increased the chance that Ugandan soldiers would overwhelm them. On the night of July 3rd, the planes took off. For 7 hours, they flew low over the Red Sea and the vast Sudanese desert. Their navigators using stars and dead reckoning. Inside, the The commandos sat in silence, checking their weapons, going over the plan for the 100th time. As the first C-130 approached Entebbe, the pilot saw the runway lights were on. Was it a trap or just routine? He took the chance and landed, his plane shuddering as it touched down. The fake motorcade rolled out, heading for the old terminal. The deception worked for about 30 seconds. Then, a Ugandan soldier raised his rifle. An Israeli commando shot him first. The element of surprise was gone. What followed was an explosion of controlled violence. Commandos burst into the terminal, shouting in Hebrew, "Get down, get down." They knew the terrorists would be looking for the hostages to stand up, making them easy targets. In the chaotic, deafening firefight that followed, the commandos had to make split-second decisions. Who was a terrorist? Who was a hostage? Who was a Ugandan soldier? They fired with precision, killing the hijackers where they stood. Outside, other teams secured the runway, fought off Ugandan reinforcements, and destroyed Ugandan MiG fighters on the ground to prevent any pursuit. In just 53 minutes from landing, the first plane was taking off again, filled with rescued hostages. The operation was a stunning success, but it was not without its cost. 3 hostages were killed in the crossfire, and the unit commander, Lieutenant Colonel Yonatan Netanyahu, brother of future Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, was shot and killed by a Ugandan sniper. The world reacted with astonishment. From a military perspective, the raid was a masterpiece of planning, intelligence, and execution. It was a massive boost to Israeli morale and a devastating blow to terrorist groups who thought they were safe in distant sanctuaries. But what were the deeper consequences? The raid sent a clear message. Israel would go to the ends of the earth to protect its citizens. No distance was too far, no risk too great. It was the ultimate demonstration of the country's commitment to its people. For Mossad, the operation was a reminder of their core mission, providing the intelligence that makes the impossible possible. Without the blueprints, without the information from spies and released hostages, the raid could never have been planned. Yet the operation also raised difficult questions. Was the use of such overwhelming force the only option? Could diplomacy have saved more lives? The 3 dead hostages were a tragic reminder that even the most brilliant operations carry a human cost. The raid also strengthened Idi Amin's rhetoric against Israel and the West. In the following weeks, he authorized the murder of several hostages who had been left behind in a nearby hospital, and an elderly Israeli woman, Dora Bloch, who had been taken to a Kampala hospital before the raid, was murdered by Ugandan security forces in retaliation. The legacy of Entebbe is complex. It remains a symbol of Israeli resilience and military prowess. But it also serves as a reminder that in the world of counterterrorism, there are no perfect solutions, only choices between terrible alternatives. As the planes returned to Israel with the rescued hostages, the nation celebrated. But in the halls of Mossad and the IDF, the analysis was already beginning. What did we learn? What could we do better next time? Because in the Middle East, there is always a next time. And the next threat would not be a hijacking. It would be something far more sinister, emerging from the laboratories of a hostile nation determined to possess the ultimate weapon. The lesson of Entebbe was that no threat was too distant to ignore. But what happens when the threat is not in an airport terminal, but in a heavily fortified nuclear reactor? How do you stop a program, not just rescue its potential victims? The answer would require not a daring raid, but but a different kind of courage, the courage to act alone, against the advice of allies, and to destroy what others believed was untouchable. The concierge at the luxurious Al Bustan Rotana Hotel in Dubai never suspected a thing. The well-dressed European couple checking into room 230 seemed like any other affluent tourists visiting the glittering emirate in January 2010. They paid with cash, offered perfectly forged passports, and even made dinner reservations at the hotel's fine dining establishment. Their impeccable manners and professional demeanor gave no hint that they were Mossad operatives, or that their target lay just down the hall. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh, a founding commander of Hamas's military wing, had grown complacent. He believed the lavish hotels and shopping malls of Dubai offered both luxury and safety. For years, he had masterminded weapons smuggling operations from Iran to Gaza, while evading multiple assassination attempts. He moved cautiously, changing routines frequently, trusting only a handful of associates. Yet on this January evening, as he returned to his room, unaware he was being watched by 27 assassins, his luck was about to run out. How does an intelligence agency track a ghost? How do you find someone who doesn't want to be found in a city that prides itself on discretion and privacy? The operation to eliminate al-Mabhouh represented a new era of espionage, one where traditional spycraft merged with cutting-edge technology to create something both terrifying and brilliant. The planning had begun months earlier. Mossad had tracked al-Mabhouh's movements through several countries, learning his patterns, identifying his associates, and waiting for the perfect moment. Dubai was chosen not for its convenience, but for its vulnerability. The city's extensive surveillance infrastructure could be turned against itself, and its status as a neutral ground had made al-Mabhouh less cautious. The hit team arrived in Dubai in small groups over several days, entering through different airports using forged passports from Britain, Ireland, France, Germany, and Australia. Each operative had a specific role: surveillance, logistics, counter-surveillance, or the actual elimination. They operated in isolated cells, communicating through encrypted burn phones that were destroyed after single use. What made this operation different from previous Mossad assassinations was the technological sophistication. The team used highly advanced surveillance equipment that could pick up conversations through hotel room doors. They employed RFID cloners to copy electronic keycards without touching them. They even had real-time access to Dubai's immigration database, allowing them to monitor the movement of their target and themselves through airport security. The operation unfolded with clinical precision. When al-Mabhouh left his room for dinner, a female operative, disguised as a hotel staff member, gained access to install hidden cameras. Another team member disabled the hallway surveillance camera at precisely the right moment. The assassins knew they had a narrow window, approximately 6 hours before al-Mabhouh's scheduled morning meeting with Iranian officials. At 8:25 p.m., al-Mabhouh returned to his room. He never noticed the two operatives who slipped in behind him using a copied keycard. The actual elimination took less than 90 seconds. The method was sophisticated and designed to mimic a natural death combination of succinylcholine, a muscle relaxant that causes paralysis, and potassium, which induces cardiac arrest. The operatives left the room exactly as they found it, taking care to remove any evidence of their presence. The operation might have been perfect, but for one thing: Dubai's extensive surveillance network. While the Mossad team had disabled specific cameras, they hadn't accounted for all of them. What followed was perhaps the most comprehensive forensic investigation of an assassination in history. Dubai's police chief, Lieutenant General Dahi Kulfan Tamim, personally led the investigation. His team pieced together the entire operation from security footage, immigration records, and financial transactions. They identified 27 suspects and published their names, photographs, and passport details in an unprecedented public shaming of Mossad. The fallout was immediate and diplomatic. The use of forged passports from allied nations created international incidents. Britain expelled an Israeli diplomat, the first such action in over 20 years. Australia and Ireland demanded explanations. The operation, while technically successful, had become a public relations disaster. But beyond the diplomatic consequences, the Dubai operation raised disturbing questions about the future of espionage and assassination. If Mossad could pull this off in one of the most surveilled cities on Earth, what did that mean for the safety of other potential targets? How could anyone feel secure when an entire hit team could enter a country, execute a mission, and vanish without a trace, using the identities of real, living citizens from allied nations? The technological aspects were equally troubling. The operation demonstrated that Mossad had capabilities that blurred the line between physical and cyber espionage. Their ability to access secure databases, clone electronic access cards, and coordinate 27 operatives in real time suggested a level of technological advancement that few other intelligence agencies could match. Yet, for all its sophistication, the operation also revealed the arrogance that sometimes accompanies technological superiority. The team had become so confident in their methods that they neglected basic operational security, assuming their technological edge would protect them from detection. They underestimated Dubai's police force and its determination to solve the crime. In the end, the Dubai operation represented both the pinnacle of Mossad's technical capabilities and a warning about the limits of technology alone. The agency had proven it could execute one of the most complex assassinations in history, but in doing so, it had exposed its methods, compromised its relationships with allies, and created a blueprint for what not to do in future operations. The question remains, was the elimination of one Hamas commander worth the diplomatic firestorm and public exposure? The answer likely depends on whether you believe such operations truly deter terrorism or simply create more determined enemies. What cannot be denied is that the rules of engagement had changed forever and the world was watching. As the dust settled in Dubai, a new threat was emerging, one that couldn't be stopped with muscle relaxants or forged passports. In secret facilities across Iran, scientists were working on a different kind of weapon, one that would force Mossad to once again reinvent itself for a battle where the stakes were nothing less than regional annihilation. The era of cyber warfare was about to begin, and the battlefield would be nowhere and everywhere at once. The morning of September 5, 1972, dawned bright and clear over the Olympic Village in Munich. The world was watching the games, watching young athletes achieve their dreams. But in the early hours, while athletes slept, 8 figures dressed in tracksuits scaled the fence. They carried duffel bags, and inside those bags were AK-47s. They headed straight for Building 31, where the Israeli team was housed. What began as a day of peace and sport instantly became a nightmare. The world watched in real time as Black September terrorists took 11 Israeli athletes hostage. The demand was simple: released 234 prisoners held in Israeli jails. The world held its breath, waiting for a negotiation that would never come. But in Tel Aviv, in a secure underground facility, the response was already being formulated, and it would not involve negotiation. Golda Meir, Israel's prime minister, delivered the verdict that would define a generation of intelligence operations. We must send our boys. The message was clear. There would be no bargaining with terrorists. The world might see this as a tragedy. Israel saw it as an act of war, and war demanded a response. The subsequent German rescue attempt at Fürstenfeldbruck Air Base ended in catastrophic failure. The world watched on television as a botched operation led to the death of all 11 hostages. The images were seared into the global consciousness. Masked terrorists on balconies, the anxious face of a negotiator, and finally, the horrific climax at the airfield. In Israel, the grief was immeasurable, but it was quickly forged into a cold, hard resolve. The message from the government was absolute. This would not stand. For Mossad, the directive was unprecedented in its scope and ruthlessness. They were to hunt down and eliminate every person involved in the planning, execution, and support of the Munich massacre. The operation was given a name that left no room for misinterpretation. Operation Wrath of God. How do you find people who don't want to be found? People who vanish into the shadows of the Middle East and Europe. Mossad's first task was to build a list, not just the 8 terrorists who had been killed or captured in Munich, but the planners, the financiers, the logistics men. The names were compiled into a secret ledger, Deadliest, approved at the highest levels of the Israeli government. The hit teams, known as Katzes, were drawn from the elite Caesarea unit. They were granted extraordinary powers, license to kill, vast resources, and absolute deniability. Their motto was simple: let the world know. Let them know and be afraid. The first target was Wal Zaider, a Palestinian intellectual and cousin of Yasser Arafat, who was identified as the mastermind behind the Munich operation. He was shot 11 times in the lobby of his Rome apartment building, 1 bullet for each Israeli athlete. The operation was clean, clinical, and brutal. The message was sent, but was this justice or vengeance? The question echoed through the halls of Mossad. Some agents saw it as a moral duty, a necessary act to deter future terrorism. Others wrestled with the conscience of becoming judge, jury, and executioner. They were no longer just intelligence gatherers. They were instruments of state-sanctioned retribution. The hunt stretched from the crowded refugee camps of Beirut to the quiet streets of European capitals. In Paris, Mahmoud Hamshari, the PLO's representative in France, was killed by a bomb planted in his telephone. The device was triggered remotely when he answered a call that confirmed his identity. The technical precision was terrifying. In Cyprus, Hussein al-Bashir, another key planner, died when his hotel bed exploded in the middle of the night. The explosives were so carefully placed that the room above and below remained untouched. Mossad's operations relied on a sophisticated network of Syanim, Jewish volunteers living abroad who provided everything from apartment keys to rental cars without asking questions. This network gave Mossad eyes and ears everywhere, creating a web of support that made their agents nearly invisible. But the pressure to succeed was immense. The teams operated under constant stress, knowing that any mistake could mean exposure, diplomatic scandal, or death. They lived under false identities, cut off from families and friends, their real lives erased. The psychological toll was devastating. How long can you live a lie before you forget who you really are? The operation's most controversial moment came in the small Norwegian town of Lillehammer. Acting on flawed intelligence, a hit team ambushed a man they believed was Ali Hassan Salam, the Red Prince and chief of Black September. They shot him multiple times in front of his pregnant wife. The man was Ahmed Bouchiki, an innocent Moroccan waiter. He had no connection to terrorism whatsoever. The Lillehammer affair was a disaster. Norwegian police arrested 6 Mossad operatives. The ensuing trial exposed Mossad's methods to the world, revealing the use of forged passports, surveillance techniques, and the Synonym network. The global sympathy Israel had enjoyed after Munich evaporated, replaced by condemnation. The hunters had become the hunted. Back in Israel, the failure prompted a painful reckoning. Had the operation gone too far? Had the thirst for vengeance compromised their judgment? The debate raged in secret. Some argued that the mistake, while tragic, did not invalidate the entire mission. The message of deterrence was still being received in Palestinian circles. Others feared that Mossad had lost its moral compass, becoming the very thing it sought to destroy. The operation continued for years, its list growing shorter. But the cost was etched on the soul of the agency. The wrath of God had not been a clean, divine strike. It was messy, human, and morally complex. It showed that in the shadows, the line between justice and revenge is often blurred beyond recognition. The world moved on, but Mossad did not. The lessons of Munich and its aftermath would shape its approach to counter-terrorism for decades. The era of simple retaliation was over. The next threats would require more than a gun and a list. They would require cunning, patience, and a willingness to operate in the grayest areas of morality. And the next threat was already emerging, one that would come not from a terrorist cell, but from a nuclear reactor in the heart of an enemy nation. The stakes were about to get much, much higher. The picturesque Norwegian town of Lillehammer seemed about as far from the front lines of the Middle East conflict as one could imagine. Nestled between serene lakes and forested mountains, this quiet community of 25,000 represented everything Mossad's operatives were supposed to avoid: a peaceful, neutral European country with efficient law enforcement and virtually no Palestinian presence. Yet, in the summer of 1973, this unlikely town would become the setting for Mossad's most devastating operational failure, one that would expose its methods to the world and force a painful reckoning within the organization. How does the world's most sophisticated intelligence agency mistake an innocent waiter for a high-value target? What happens when the hunter becomes the hunted in a foreign land? The answers would reveal the human cost of operating in the shadows. The operation began with what seemed like solid intelligence. Mossad had received information that Ali Hassan Salamatha, man known as the Red Prince, for his role in planning the Munich Olympics attack, had been spotted in Norway. Salam was at the top of Mossad's most wanted list, and the team dispatched to Lillehammer believed they were on the verge of their most significant capture since Eichmann. The operatives arrived in small groups throughout July 1973, entering Norway through different border crossings and airports. They used forged Canadian and British passports, established safe houses, and began their surveillance operation. For days, they tracked their targeted, dark-haired man of Middle Eastern descent, who fit Salameh's general description. They watched him go to work, spend time with his Norwegian wife, and socialize with friends. They noted his routines, his habits, his vulnerabilities. What they failed to notice were the crucial differences between their target and the real Salem. The man they were watching was slightly taller, spoke fluent Norwegian, and worked regular shifts at a local restaurant. These details might have alerted a more careful team, but the operatives in Lillehammer were under immense pressure to succeed. The memory of Munich was fresh, and the directive from headquarters was clear: find and eliminate those responsible. On the evening of July 21, 1973, the team made their move. As Ahmed Bouchiki walked home from the cinema with his pregnant wife, two operatives approached him from behind. They fired multiple shots at close range, killing him instantly in front of his horrified wife. The operation seemed clean until the local police arrived faster than anticipated. The first hint that something had gone terribly wrong came when Norwegian newspapers the next day identified the victim not as a Palestinian militant, but as a Moroccan-born Norwegian citizen with no political connections. Ahmed Bouchiki had come to Norway seeking a better life, worked as a waiter, married a local woman, and was expecting his first child. He had no known connection to any militant groups or political causes. The Mossad team, which had planned to exit Norway immediately after the operation, found themselves trapped. Norwegian police had quickly identified the rental cars used by the operatives, and were conducting one of the most thorough manhunts in the country's history. Within days, 6 Mossad operatives were in Norwegian custody, their forged documents and cover stories unraveling under skilled interrogation. The subsequent trial became an international sensation. For the first time, Mossad's methods were exposed in a public courtroom. The world learned about the use of forged passports, the surveillance techniques, the network of safe houses, and the detailed planning that went into assassination operations. The Norwegian prosecutors presented evidence of a sophisticated intelligence operation that had gone horrifically wrong. Back in Israel, the political fallout was immediate and severe. Prime Minister Golda Meir faced difficult questions about how her government had authorized an operation that resulted in the death of an innocent man. Within Mossad, the failure prompted intense soul-searching. How had their verification procedures failed so completely? Why had multiple operatives ignored warning signs that their target might not be who they thought? The answers were complex and troubling. The pressure to avenge Munich had created an environment where careful intelligence work was sometimes sacrificed for rapid action. The compartmentalized nature of Mossad operations meant that field operatives had limited ability to question intelligence from headquarters, and the emotional burden of hunting those responsible for the athlete murders had clouded professional judgment. The Lillehammer affair forced Mossad to fundamentally rethink its approach to overseas operations. New verification protocols were established, requiring multiple independent confirmations of a target's identity. Training was enhanced to include more emphasis on cultural awareness and avoiding cognitive biases. The agency implemented stricter rules of engagement to prevent similar tragedies. Yet the damage was done. The operational failure in Norway damaged Mossad's reputation with allied intelligence services and made future cooperation more difficult. European countries became more vigilant about monitoring Israeli intelligence activities on their soil. The agency's aura of invincibility had been shattered. For the individual operatives involved, the consequences were life-changing. Those captured served prison sentences in Norway before being quietly repatriated to Israel, where they faced professional disgrace and personal turmoil. The psychological impact of killing an innocent man would haunt them for decades. The Boushiki family never recovered from the tragedy. Ahmed's wife suffered a miscarriage shortly after his death, and the family's attempts to seek justice through international courts would continue for years. Their story became a powerful reminder of the human cost of intelligence operations gone wrong. As Mossad licked its wounds and implemented reforms, a new threat was emerging that would test the agency's adapted capabilities. Palestinian militant groups were becoming more sophisticated, and their operations were expanding beyond the Middle East to targets in Europe and elsewhere. The challenge would require Mossad to balance its determination to prevent attacks with the hard lessons learned in Lilyhammer. The question remained: could an organization built for ruthless efficiency learn the lessons of restraint without losing its effectiveness? The answer would determine not only Mossad's future, but the safety of potential targets across Europe and the Middle East. As the agency regrouped, it would face operations that required even greater precision and discrimination operations, where the margin for error would be even smaller and the consequences of failure even greater. The Shadow War was entering a new phase, one where technology would become increasingly important, but where human judgment would remain the critical factor between success and catastrophic failure. The next, we would see Mossad facing threats that required both its traditional strengths and its newly acquired wisdom. The man known among intelligence circles as the father of the Iranian bomb was running late. On November 27, 2020, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh's convoy traveled along a quiet highway outside Tehran, following the same route he had taken for years. The nuclear physicist likely felt secure, surrounded by his security detail, traveling in armored vehicles through what should have been friendly territory. He never saw the satellite-controlled machine gun hidden in a parked pickup truck, operated by agents who might have been miles away or continents away. In less than 60 seconds, 12 bullets struck Fakhrizadeh's vehicle with surgical precision. The attack employed no suicide bombers, no teams of operatives storming the car, no traditional explosives. By the time Fakhrizadeh's guards understood what was happening, the shooters had vanished without a trace. The operation represented something new in the shadow war between Israel and Iran, a fusion of artificial intelligence, satellite technology, and remote-controlled warfare that changed the rules of engagement forever. How do you fight a war without soldiers? How do you eliminate threats without risking your own agents? And what happens when warfare becomes so automated that humans become little more than programmers of destruction? The campaign against Iran's nuclear program didn't begin with remote-controlled assassinations. It started quietly in the early 2000s, as intelligence agencies began noticing suspicious procurement patterns. Iranian agents seeking specialized materials from Germany, Switzerland, and Russia, materials with few civilian applications but crucial for nuclear weapons development. Mossad responded by establishing a new division dedicated solely to counter-proliferation, staffed by nuclear physicists, computer experts, and engineers who understood both the science and the security implications. The first approach was diplomatic. Israeli intelligence shared findings with Western agencies, hoping international pressure would halt Iran's progress. When diplomacy failed, Mossad moved to more direct methods. They began what insiders called the long leash strategies to acquire components, then sabotaging them before they reached their destination. Centrifuges would arrive with critical parts subtly damaged. Computer systems would contain hidden malware. The goal was to create maximum delay with minimum visibility. But as Iran's program advanced, so did Mossad's methods. The turning point came with Operation Orchard in 2007, when Israeli jets destroyed a suspected nuclear reactor in Syria. The operation demonstrated Israel's willingness to use military force, but it also revealed the limitations of airstrikes against hardened underground facilities like those Iran was building. This reality forced Mossad to innovate. If they couldn't bomb the facilities, they would sabotage them from within. Thus began the most sophisticated cyber warfare campaign in history. The Stuxnet worm, discovered in 2010, represented a quantum leap in cyber warfare. Unlike previous viruses designed for espionage or disruption, Stuxnet was precision-guided sabotage. It specifically targeted the programmable logic controllers that ran Iran's uranium enrichment centrifuges, causing them to spin out of control while displaying normal readings to operators. The damage was physical, extensive, and deniable. What made Stuxnet remarkable was unjust its complexity. The worm utilized for zero-day vulnerabilities and multiple infiltration methods, but its psychological impact. For the first time, a cyber weapon had caused physical destruction in another country's critical infrastructure. The message to Iran was clear: your most secure facilities are vulnerable, and we can damage them without ever crossing your borders. The cyber campaign expanded beyond centrifuges. Between 2010 and 2020, mysterious explosions rocked Iranian military and nuclear facilities. A power plant in Shiraz suddenly went offline. A missile facility near Khorramabad suffered catastrophic equipment failures. An explosion at the Parchin military base destroyed sensitive testing equipment. Each incident was officially attributed to accidents or technical difficulties, but the pattern was unmistakable. The human dimension of the campaign proved more controversial. Between 2010 and 2012, 5 Iranian nuclear scientists were assassinated in strikingly similar operations. Motorcycle riders attaching magnetic bombs to their vehicles during Tehran's chaotic morning traffic. The operations were audacious, conducted in broad daylight in a security-obsessed police state. These assassinations raised difficult ethical questions. Were scientists legitimate targets? Where did one draw the line between military operators and civilian researchers? Mossad's position was clear. These were not academic researchers, but key figures in a weapons program aimed at their destruction. Yet the moral calculus became increasingly complex as the campaign expanded. The technological evolution of these operations reflected Mossad's adaptation to changing security environments. The early magnetic bombs gave way to more sophisticated methods. A scientist killed by a poisoned letter, another by a malfunctioning laboratory device, others in carefully staged accidents. Each method was designed to maximize psychological impact while providing plausible deniability. By the time of Fakhrizadeh's assassination, the campaign had reached its technological apex. The remote-controlled machine gun represented a new paradigm. Elimination without operatives, the system likely used facial recognition to identify the target, satellite feeds for targeting, and encrypted signals for remote operation. The killers might have been sitting in Tel Aviv or anywhere with a satellite connection. The implications of this technological evolution extend far beyond the Israel-Iran conflict. We're entering an era where assassination requires no bravery, no fieldcraft, no personal risk. The moral distance between killer and target has never been greater, a development that should concern anyone who believes in proportional response and accountability in warfare. Iran's response to these operations has been equally innovative. They've developed their own cyber warfare capabilities, launched drone attacks against Israeli interests, and allegedly plotted retaliatory assassinations against Israeli officials abroad. The shadow war has created its own ecosystem of attack and counterattack, innovation and adaptation. The campaign against Iran's nuclear program represents both Mossad's greatest technological achievement and its most profound moral challenge. They've delayed a nuclear Iran by years, possibly decades, through a combination of brilliant intelligence work and ruthless operations. But they've also established dangerous precedents about the use of cyber warfare and remote assassination. As we look to the future, several questions remain unanswered. How long can such a campaign continue before triggering outright war? What happens when other nations adopt these methods for their own purposes? And perhaps most importantly, in a world where killing becomes automated and deniable, how do we maintain any meaningful concept of proportional response or accountability? The invisible war continues even now, in server farms and research laboratories, in the hidden spaces between diplomacy and open conflict. The next chapter may already be written in code, waiting for the right moment to execute. And unlike traditional warfare, we might never know it's happening until it's too late. The question we must ask ourselves is not just whether Mossad's campaign has been effective, but whether we're comfortable with the world it's creating, a world where wars are fought in silence and darkness, with no soldiers to hold accountable and no borders to contain the conflict. The control room at Natanz nuclear facility should have been the most secure place in Iran, behind reinforced concrete walls, protected by air gaps and sophisticated encryption. Technicians monitored thousands of centrifuges spinning at supersonic speeds. Yet, the monitors showed normal readings, while, in reality, the delicate machines were tearing themselves apart from the inside out. What the Iranian engineers were witnessing, though they didn't know it yet, was the world's first digital precision weapon. A computer worm of unprecedented sophistication had penetrated their secure systems and was systematically destroying the very heart of Iran's nuclear program. The attackers had achieved what once seemed impossible. They had weaponized code and launched a cyber strike that caused physical destruction without a single soldier crossing borders or aircraft violating airspace. How do you fight a war without bullets or bombs? How do you sabotage your enemy's most critical infrastructure without ever setting foot in their country? The answers would redefine modern conflict and establish Mossad as a pioneer in the world's newest battlefield, cyberspace. The development of Mossad's cyber capabilities didn't happen overnight. It began in the early 2000s, as intelligence analysts noticed troubling patterns in Iran's procurement efforts. Iranian agents were shopping for specific industrial components, pressure sensors, frequency converters, vacuum seals that had limited civilian use, but were essential for uranium enrichment. The pieces were coming together. Iran was building a nuclear program, despite international sanctions and diplomatic pressure. Traditional methods of sabotage, like those used against earlier nuclear programs in Iraq and Syria, wouldn't work against Iran's dispersed and heavily fortified facilities. Mossad needed a new approach, one that could bypass physical security and strike at the digital heart of the program. Thus began the most ambitious cyber warfare project in history. The operation, later dubbed Olympic Games by American intelligence partners, represented a fundamental shift in how nations confront threats. Instead of training commandos, Mossad recruited computer scientists. Instead of developing new explosives, they developed new algorithms. The battlefield moved from physical spaces to virtual ones, and the weapons became lines of code rather than bullets. The Stuxnet worm, as it would later be known, was a masterpiece of digital engineering. It was designed to do what many experts thought impossible: infiltrate air-gapped systems, networks physically isolated from the internet, remain undetected while mapping the network, and then cause specific physical damage to predetermined targets. The worm specifically targeted Siemens industrial control systems, the kind used at Natanz, could distinguish between systems running centrifuges and those performing other functions. The delivery method was equally ingenious. Since the target systems weren't connected to the internet, the worm had to be introduced physically. Intelligence suggested that Iranian engineers frequently used personal USB drives to transfer data between systems, a common practice despite security protocols. So the attackers designed the worm to spread via USB devices, potentially planting infected drives near facilities, or even compromising contractors who worked at multiple sites. Once inside a system, Stuxnet employed multiple zero-day vulnerabilities previously unknown. Security flossed to gain administrator privileges and hide its presence. It then began its real work, subtly altering the speed of centrifuges while feeding false normal readings to operators. The centrifuges would spin too fast or too slow, causing massive vibrations that damaged their delicate components. By the time engineers realized something was wrong, entire cascades of centrifuges would be destroyed. The psychological impact was as significant as the physical damage. Iranian scientists began questioning their own instruments, their own expertise. They couldn't trust their monitoring systems, couldn't be certain their equipment was functioning properly. The uncertainty created delays, forced redesigns, and sapped morale. A nuclear program that should have taken years was set back by a digital attack that left no return address. But Stuxnet was only the most visible part of Mossad's cyber campaign. Parallel operations targeted other aspects of Iran's nuclear infrastructure. The STARS operation, revealed in 2019, involved penetrating a secure warehouse in Tehran where nuclear documents were stored. Agents used cutting-edge technology to bypass sophisticated alarms, extract thousands of documents, and spirit them out of the country, all without triggering any security alerts. Another operation targeted the Shahid Mahalati industrial complex, where security cameras were hacked to show empty hallways, while operatives physically removed critical components. In yet another operation, Mossad allegedly accessed Iran's fuel reserves system, causing massive lines at gas stations and sparking public protests against the government. The cyber campaign represented a fundamental rethinking of intelligence operations. Traditional risks compromised agents, diplomatic incidents, physical confrontations were dramatically reduced. Operations could be launched from thousands of miles away, with deniability built into their very design. The playing field had been leveled. A small nation could now confront a larger adversary without risking conventional military engagement. However, this new battlefield created its own ethical dilemmas. Cyberweapons, once deployed, don't disappear. Stuxnet eventually escaped its intended target and spread globally, infecting systems in India, Indonesia, and even the United States. while the worm was designed to only activate under specific conditions. Its discovery by security researchers revealed the potential for collateral damage in cyber warfare. There were also questions about proportionality and accountability. When a bomb drops, there's no question about the source or intent. When a nuclear facility mysteriously malfunctions, the evidence is circumstantial. The rules of engagement, developed over centuries of conventional warfare, do untisely apply to operations where the attackers might be sitting in an air-conditioned office building rather than crawling through mud. Iran's response demonstrated that cyber warfare cuts both ways. Iranian hackers targeted Israeli water systems, electrical grids, and transportation networks. While most attacks were thwarted, the message was clear. The digital battlefield had no front lines, and critical infrastructure in both countries was vulnerable. What began as a campaign against nuclear proliferation had escalated into a continuous digital conflict affecting millions of civilians. The most profound impact of Mossad's cyber operations may be their influence on global security paradigms. Nations around the world watched the campaign against Iran and recognized that future conflicts would be fought as much in server farms as on battlefields. Cyber commands were established, digital warfare budgets increased, and a new arms race began, this one focused on ones and zeros rather than tanks and planes. As we look to the future, the questions become increasingly complex. How do nations deter cyber attacks when attribution is difficult and traditional military responses may be disproportionate? What rules should govern operations that target civilian infrastructure? And how do intelligence agencies maintain their edge when the technological landscape changes every 6 months? The digital battlefield has permanently altered the calculus of conflict. Mossad's campaign against Iran's nuclear program demonstrated that determined nations could delay nuclear proliferation through innovative means. But it also opened a Pandora's box of cyber warfare capabilities that are now available to state actors and non-state groups alike. The next chapter in this story is already being written, not in operations rooms, but in research laboratories where artificial intelligence is being weaponized and quantum computing threatens to break all existing encryption. The question is no longer whether cyber warfare will play a role in future conflicts, but whether humanity can establish rules for a type of warfare that evolves faster than our ability to regulate it. One thing is certain. The world watched what happened at Natanz, and every nation with critical infrastructure and geopolitical rivals began asking the same question. Are we next? And how do we protect ourselves against an enemy we might never see, using weapons we might not understand until it's too late? The agent known as Youssef moved through the crowded streets of Beirut's southern suburbs with the ease of a local. He wore the modest clothing of a shopkeeper, carried a worn briefcase, and nodded respectfully to neighbors. For 3 years, he had built this cover-up, quiet importer of electronics from Dubai, with a modest apartment and unremarkable routines. His handlers in Tel Aviv had been patient, investing unprecedented resources into what they called the long game. Their target wasn't a person, but an entire network, Hezbollah's military infrastructure in Lebanon. On this humid evening in May 2004, Youssef's briefcase contained something more valuable than invoices or samples. Hidden in a false compartment were 12 tiny fiber-optic cameras, each no larger than a coin, along with signal relays that could transmit through concrete. His mission: penetrate a newly constructed underground facility that intelligence suggested housed Hezbollah's long-range missile program. What happened next would become legend in intelligence circles and demonstrate how Mossad's conflict with Hezbollah had evolved into the world's most sophisticated intelligence contest. How does an intelligence agency fight an organization that operates simultaneously as a political party, social movement, and military force? What happens when your adversary has no embassies to bug, no diplomats to turn, and no clear chain of command to penetrate? The struggle between Mossad and Hezbollah represents perhaps the most complex intelligence challenge of the modern era battle, fought in shadows within shadows. The roots of this conflict stretch back to 1982, when Israel's invasion of Lebanon created the conditions for Hezbollah's formation. Initially a loose coalition of Shiite resistance groups, Hezbollah quickly evolved into a disciplined organization with Iranian backing. Early Mossad assessments tragically underestimated the group, viewing them as another militia that would fade after Israel's withdrawal. This miscalculation would cost Israel dearly in the coming decades. The first phase of the intelligence war was conventional. Recruit agents within Hezbollah's ranks, intercept communications, and disrupt operations. Mossad achieved significant early successes, including the 1992 assassination of Hezbollah leader Abbas al-Musawi. But the operation revealed the law of unintended consequences. Al-Musawi's death brought to power a more sophisticated and dangerous leader, Hassan Nasrallah. Under Nasrallah, Hezbollah transformed from a guerrilla force into a hybrid entity that combined military discipline with political savvy and social services. This transformation forced Mossad to completely rethink its approach. Traditional intelligence methods struggled against an organization that enjoyed genuine popular support in parts of Lebanon and operated with iron discipline. The turning point came in the late 1990s, when Mossad began noticing alarming changes in Hezbollah's capabilities. Iranian assistance had evolved from small arms to sophisticated rockets, then to drones, and finally to precision-guided missiles. The group was developing military infrastructure hidden beneath civilian areas, literally building their defenses under hospitals, schools, and apartment buildings. Mossad's response was Operation Canvas, a multi-year effort to map Hezbollah's military infrastructure with unprecedented precision. The operation combined every intelligence discipline: signals intelligence, monitored communications, human intelligence, penetrated support networks, and aerial surveillance mapped facilities. But the most innovative aspect was the use of environmental intelligence, analyzing sewage flow, electrical consumption, and construction patterns to identify hidden facilities. Youssef's mission was part of this broader effort. That evening, he entered a residential building adjacent to the suspected missile facility. Posing as a technician checking wiring, he gained access to the basement and began installing cameras in ventilation shafts that connected to the adjacent facility. The operation took 6 hours of painstaking work, with Youssef calmly responding to questions from residents while planting his surveillance devices. The intelligence payoff was staggering. Over the next 3 months, the hidden cameras revealed that Hezbollah had not only acquired Syrian-made M600 missiles with precision guidance capabilities, but had also built underground launch facilities that could survive aerial bombardment. The intelligence prompted a fundamental reassessment of Israel's defense strategy and led to the development of new bunker-busting munitions. But Hezbollah was adapting too. The group developed sophisticated counterintelligence capabilities that made traditional espionage increasingly dangerous. They implemented rigorous compartmentalization, used advanced encryption, and employed counter-surveillance teams that could detect technical monitoring devices. Mossad agents operating in Lebanon faced unprecedented risks. The conflict reached a new level of sophistication after the 2006 Lebanon War. Both sides had learned painful lessons. Hezbollah recognized that Israel's aerial superiority demanded better concealment and dispersion of forces. Israel understood that Hezbollah's military infrastructure was more extensive and better protected than anyone had imagined. In the war's aftermath, Mossad launched Operation Ghost, an effort to penetrate Hezbollah's rebuilt military infrastructure. This time, the approach was technological rather than human. Mossad developed miniature surveillance drones disguised as birds or insects that could monitor suspected facilities. They planted monitoring devices in telecommunications infrastructure that Hezbollah used for command and control. They even allegedly compromised the group's secure fiber optic network by tapping undersea cables. Hezbollah's response demonstrated their own growing technical capabilities. They began using trained dogs to detect electronic surveillance devices. They implemented strict electromagnetic emission controls around sensitive facilities. They developed their own signals intelligence units to detect Israeli monitoring attempts. The battle escalated into cyberspace. Mossad's Unit 81, their cyber warfare division, allegedly penetrated Hezbollah's communications networks multiple times between 2010 and 2015. But Hezbollah, with Iranian assistance, developed increasingly sophisticated cyber defenses. They used analog communication methods for sensitive operations, implemented air-gapped systems for critical infrastructure, and conducted regular counter-cyber operations. This shadow war had very real consequences. In January 2015, an Israeli airstrike killed 6 Hezbollah operatives and an Iranian general in Syria. The precision of the strike suggested exquisite intelligence, likely from penetration of Hezbollah's communications. Hezbollah's response came 2 weeks later when they ambushed an Israeli military patrol along the Lebanese border, killing 2 soldiers. The cycle of action and reaction continued, each side learning from the other's tactics. What makes this conflict unique is its asymmetry. Mossad possesses technological resources Hezbollah cannot match: satellite coverage, advanced cyber capabilities, global intelligence networks. But Hezbollah enjoys advantages of its own: deep knowledge of local terrain, support within population centers, and the ability to operate in the open as a political movement while maintaining covert military capabilities. The human cost of this shadow war remains largely hidden from public view. Mossad has lost numerous agents in Lebanon over the decades, their stories never told. Hezbollah has seen key operatives eliminated, sometimes in mysterious circumstances, abroad. Both sides have learned that in the intelligence world, today's victory may plant the seeds of tomorrow's defeat. Perhaps the most significant development in recent years has been the theater of operations expanding beyond Lebanon and Israel. Mossad has allegedly targeted Hezbollah operations in Syria, Cyprus, Bulgaria, and even South America. Hezbollah has reportedly attempted attacks against Israeli interests in India, Thailand, and Azerbaijan. The shadow war has gone global, with both sides learning to operate in diverse environments. As we look to the future, several questions remain unanswered. Can intelligence alone contain a non-state actor with state-level capabilities? How does Mossad balance the need for aggressive intelligence collection against the risk of escalating conflict? And what happens when other non-state actors learn from Hezbollah's example? The next chapter in this conflict is already being written, not in the familiar landscapes of Lebanon, but in the murky world of financial intelligence. As Hezbollah expands its global operations, Mossad has shifted focus to tracking and disrupting the group's financing networks. This new front in the shadow war may prove decisive, cutting off the resources that enable Hezbollah's military ambitions. But financial intelligence operates by different rules than traditional espionage. It requires cooperation with international banks, compliance with complex regulations, and navigation of diplomatic sensitivities. The question is whether Mossad can adapt its methods to this new battlefield, while maintaining the operational aggression that has characterized its approach to the Hezbollah threat. One thing is certain: the shadow war between Mossad and Hezbollah has become a permanent feature of the Middle Eastern landscape. It's a conflict that evolves constantly, with each innovation met by counter-innovation, each success prompting new challenges. In many ways, it represents the future of intelligence warfare, hybrid conflicts against hybrid adversaries, fought in the spaces between war and peace. The real lesson of this decades-long struggle may be that in the intelligence world, there are no final victories, only temporary advantages that must be constantly defended and renewed. As both organizations look to the future, they understand that the only constant is change, and the only sure thing is that the shadow war will continue in forms we cannot yet imagine. The morning sun had not yet warmed the streets of Damascus when the silver Hyundai sedan pulled to a careful stop. The driver, a man in his late 30s, with the weary posture of someone who worked too much, stepped out and nodded to the building's security guard. He was Imad Mugnio, one of the most wanted men in the Middle East, and he believed himself invisible here, in the Syrian capital, among allies. As he approached his parked SUV, he may have noticed a slight anomaly about the vehicle's rear door, perhaps a faint seam where none should be, but the thought would remain unfinished. The explosion that followed was so precise that it tore through Mugnio's body while leaving the vehicle's front seats virtually untouched. In that meticulously calculated blast on February 12, 2008, Mossad had not only eliminated a key enemy, but had demonstrated a new paradigm of targeted killing, one that combined intelligence precision with deniable execution. The operation against Mugniyah represented the culmination of years of evolution in Mossad's most controversial practice: political assassination. How does an intelligence agency decide who lives and who dies? What moral calculations justify sending teams across borders to execute individuals without trial? And when does targeted killing become counterproductive, creating new enemies faster than old ones can be eliminated? The story of Mossad's assassination campaigns is not one of trigger-happy operatives, but of cold, calculated decisions made in secure rooms in Tel Aviv. Each operation represents the end point of a long process: intelligence collection, legal review, political authorization, and meticulous planning. The shift toward targeted killings emerged from painful experience, particularly after the 1972 Munich Olympics massacre, when Israel understood that some threats could not be contained through conventional means. The early assassination operations were messy, public affairs. The 1973 killing of Mohammed Boudia in Parisa, bomb planted in his car, announced Israel's new approach, but also revealed its limitations. The operation left collateral damage, terrified civilians, and created a media spectacle. Mossad learned that effectiveness required not just eliminating the target, but controlling the narrative. The perfect assassination looked like an accident, a heart attack, or as, in Mugnia's case, a mysterious explosion that could be attributed to internal rivalries. The technological evolution of these operations reveals much about Mossad's changing methods. The 1990s saw the introduction of sophisticated poisons that mimicked natural causes. The 2000s brought remote detonation devices and coordinated multi-team operations. The 2010s witnessed the emergence of cyber-assisted killings using malware to track targets or disrupt their security systems. Perhaps the most significant shift has been in what intelligence professionals call the find, fix, finish cycle. Earlier operations required physical surveillance that put agents at risk. Today, Mossad combines signals intelligence, cyber penetration, and satellite tracking to locate targets with minimal human exposure. The 2008 operation against Mugnia demonstrated this evolution. Years of signals intelligence identified his patterns. Cyber operations confirmed his location, and a remotely triggered device executed the operation without a single Mossad agent in sight. The legal and moral framework surrounding these operations has evolved considerably. Early assassinations operated in a legal gray zone with minimal oversight. Today, each proposed targeting undergoes rigorous review by military lawyers, intelligence committees, and political leadership. Targets must meet specific criteria. They must represent an immediate threat. Their elimination must be proportional, and there must be no feasible alternative through arrest or other means. This framework, notwithstanding, the moral questions remain profound. When Mossad killed nuclear scientist Masoud Ali Mohammadi in 2010 using a bomb attached to a motorcycle, was he a legitimate military target or an academic researcher? When they killed Hamas engineer Mohammed Zouari in 2016, shooting him 12 times in broad daylight, did they eliminate a threat or create a martyr? The effectiveness of assassination as a strategy remains hotly debated. There's evidence that removing key technical experts, particularly in nuclear and missile programs, can delay enemy capabilities by years. The elimination of Hezbollah's Imad Mugnia temporarily disrupted their military operations. But there's equally compelling evidence that assassinations create blowback. They radicalize populations, inspire revenge attacks, and often lead to more brutal successors taking power. The Mugnia operation itself demonstrates this duality. While it removed a skilled military commander, it also led to Hezbollah's dramatic upgrading of its security protocols and its determination to retaliate, which eventually came in the form of a sophisticated bombing against Israeli tourists in Bulgaria in 2012. Mossad has also learned that some environments are more permissible for operations than others. The 2010 Dubai operation, in which Hamas commander Mahmoud al-Mabou was killed in a hotel room, proved technically successful but politically disastrous because it occurred in a neutral state with strong law enforcement capabilities. Conversely, operations in failed states or conflict zones attract less international attention but present greater physical risks. The psychological impact on Mossad's own operatives cannot be overlooked. Agents involved in lethal operations undergo extensive psychological screening and post-operation debriefing. Yet former operatives have spoken about the heavy burden of taking life, even when justified by national security requirements. The agency has developed increasingly sophisticated methods to distance operators from the act itself, using remote devices, timed explosives, and other methods that reduce immediate psychological trauma. As technology advances, new ethical questions emerge. The use of artificial intelligence in identifying targets, the development of autonomous weapon systems, and the potential for cyber-assisted assassinations, all present challenges that existing legal and ethical frameworks struggle to address. When an algorithm identifies a target based on pattern analysis rather than human intelligence, who bears responsibility for mistakes? The assassination campaign against Iran's nuclear scientists between 2010 and 2012 represents perhaps the most complex modern example of this strategy. The operations delayed Iran's nuclear program and demonstrated Israel's capability to strike at the heart of the regime's prized project. But they also hardened Iran's resolve, improved their security protocols, and arguably pushed the program toward greater dispersion and hardening, making eventual military action more difficult. Looking toward the future, Mossad faces the challenge of maintaining this capability in an increasingly transparent world. Ubiquitous surveillance cameras, facial recognition technology, and digital forensics make traditional tradecraft more difficult. The 2018 operation that stole Iran's nuclear archive demonstrated that Mossad was adapting, sometimes replacing lethal operations with intelligence operations that achieve similar deterrent effects without the political costs. The fundamental question remains: can targeted killing be a sustainable long-term strategy? The evidence suggests it works best as a tactical tool within a broader strategy, a way to disrupt imminent threats or remove irreplaceable expertise. But as a standalone solution, it often creates more problems than it solves. The most effective operations are those the public never hears about, the threats neutralized before they materialize. The agents turned, the technologies sabotaged. As Mossad looks to future challenges from cyber-terrorism to AI-enabled warfare, the role of targeted killing will likely evolve rather than disappear. The lesson of the past 50 years is that each technological advance creates new opportunities, but also new vulnerabilities. The explosion that killed Imad Mughniyeh in 2008 was the culmination of one era of assassination operations and the beginning of another, where the human hand in killing becomes increasingly distant and the moral calculations become increasingly complex. In the end, the story of Mossad's assassination campaigns is not just about the operations themselves, but about Israel's ongoing struggle to protect its security in a region where traditional deterrence often fails. It's a story that reveals both the agency's remarkable capabilities and the painful choices that come with them. And it's a story that continues to unfold in hidden places, with consequences we cannot yet foresee. Next, we will examine how Mossad's operations have increasingly moved into the digital realm, not just supporting physical operations, but becoming weapons in their own right. From Stuxnet to the hacking of Iran's nuclear archive, cyber capabilities have become central to Israel's security strategy, creating new opportunities and new vulnerabilities in equal measure. The numbers looked perfect, almost too perfect. The uranium enrichment cascades were operating at 99.8% efficiency. The pressure readings were ideal, and the temperatures held steady. Yet something felt wrong in the air, a subtle vibration that shouldn't be there. When he mentioned it to his supervisor, the older man shrugged. "The numbers don't lie," he said. "The machines are happy." While their screens showed perfect operation, centrifuges were actually spinning out of control, tearing themselves apart from within. The vibration Reza felt was the physical manifestation of a digital ghost, a sophisticated cyber weapon that had penetrated their secure facility without tripping a single alarm. This was Stuxnet, and it represented a revolution in warfare that would change the rules of engagement forever. The origins of Stuxnet date back to 2005, when Mossad agents began noticing troubling patterns in Iran's procurement efforts. Traditional military options presented enormous problems. Iranian facilities were buried deep underground, dispersed across multiple sites, and protected by sophisticated air defenses. Population behind the nuclear effort. Mossad needed a solution that could inflict damage without providing a clear target for retaliation. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source: Mossad's cyber warfare. Unit 8200 had been experimenting with the concept of left-of-launch attacks, disrupting weapons systems before they could be deployed. Contained vulnerabilities that could be exploited to cause physical damage. What followed was one of the most complex software development projects in history. Codenamed Olympic Games, the joint American-Israeli effort brought together mathematicians, nuclear engineers, and cybersecurity experts, and then cause precise physical damage while maintaining perfect operational secrecy. The technical hurdles were staggering. The malware needed to spread via USB drives, since target networks weren't internet connected. Install itself without detection on Windows systems. Analyze network traffic to identify specific industrial control systems. And intelligence analysts provided real-time data from Iranian facilities. The operation required perfect operational security. A single leak would alert Iran and destroy the element of surprise. Intelligence suggested that Iranian engineers frequently used personal USB drives to transfer data between systems. Despite security protocols, Mossad allegedly planted infected USB drives near facilities and even compromised the computers of contractors who worked at multiple nuclear sites. Once inside a facility, the worm could spread through local networks, searching for its specific target. Stuxnet did simply destroy Ecomintet, cause the centrifuges to spin at erratic frequencies, while feeding false normal readings to operators. The delicate machines would vibrate themselves to pieces, bearing failures would seize up, and enrichment cascades would fail catastrophically, all while control room monitors showed perfect operation. The psychological impact was as significant as the physical damage. Iranian engineers began doubting their instruments, their training, and even their sanity. A nuclear program that should have taken years was set back by a digital attack that left no return address. But Stuxnet's story took an unexpected turn in 2010, when the worm accidentally spread beyond its intended target. A technician apparently connected an infected computer to the internet, and the worm began propagating globally. The exposure created both problems and opportunities. On one hand, Iran now knew it was under cyber attack and could take countermeasures. On the other hand, the very publicity served as a powerful deterrent, though nations now understood that Israel possessed cyber capabilities that could physically destroy critical infrastructure. The aftermath of Stuxnet reveals much about the new era of cyber conflict, establishing the Iranian cyber army and launching attacks against Israeli and American targets. The attack also spurred global interest in cyber weapons, with nations around the world recognizing that future conflicts would be fought in digital realms as well as physical ones. For Mossad, Stuxnet represented both a triumph and a warning. The operation demonstrated that cyber capabilities could achieve what traditional military power could not. Cyber weapons can spread unpredictably and might be reverse-engineered by adversaries. The ethical questions raised by Stuxnet continue to resonate. Was it justified to create a weapon that could potentially spread to critical infrastructure worldwide? What rules should govern cyber attacks that cause physical destruction? How does attribution work when attacks can be launched anonymously? The operation also forced a re-evaluation of what constitutes an act of war. The agency has allegedly been involved in operations ranging from disrupting Hezbollah's communications to sabotaging Syrian air defenses. The 2018 operation that stole Iran's entire nuclear archive demonstrated how cyber capabilities could complement traditional intelligence gathering. The most significant development may be the emergence of artificial intelligence in cyber operations. Mossad is reportedly developing AI systems that can automatically identify vulnerabilities, plan attacks, and even conduct social engineering operations. This raises profound questions about the future of autonomous cyber warfare where decisions about attacks might be made by algorithms rather than humans. Looking ahead, the cyber battlefield appears destined to become more complex and more dangerous. The proliferation of internet-connected devices creates new vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure. The development of quantum computing threatens to break current encryption methods, and the emergence of AI-powered cyber weapons could create attacks that evolve in real time to overcome defenses. The story of Stuxnet ultimately represents more than just a successful intelligence operation. It marks a turning point in how nations confront threats, a shift from physical force to digital precision, from overt military action to covert cyber operations. The security personnel at Natanz, who watched their centrifuges destroy themselves, learned a painful lesson. In the modern world, your most dangerous enemy might not cross your borders, it might already be inside your systems, waiting patiently for the right moment to strike. As we continue into an increasingly digital future, the questions raised by Stuxnet become more urgent. How do we protect critical infrastructure from invisible threats? How do nations deter attacks that leave no return address? And how do we maintain stability when a single programmer potentially has more destructive power than an entire army? Now we will examine how Mossad's cyber capabilities have evolved beyond sabotage into the realm of information warfare, where battles are fought not over physical infrastructure but over truth itself, and where the most valuable weapon might be a well-placed lie rather than a perfectly crafted virus. The desert wind whispered across the tarmac of the secret Negev airbase, where a peculiar aircraft stood ready under the moonless sky. With the wingspan of a commercial jet but the height of a man, the Heron TP drone represented the new face of Israeli intelligence, blinking, patient, and lethal. Tonight's mission was typical. Cross into Syrian airspace undetected, monitor a Hezbollah weapons convoy, and transmit targeting data without ever revealing its presence. For 42 hours, the drone would orbit silently at 40,000 feet, its sophisticated sensors capturing everything from infrared signatures to cellular communications. The operators, sitting in an air-conditioned trailer 60 miles away, would never smell the desert air or feel the tension of physical proximity. This was the new normal of intelligence gathering. risk-free, persistent, and terrifyingly effective. How does a nation surrounded by enemies maintain constant surveillance over countless threats? The answer has emerged from Israel's drone program, a technological marvel that has transformed espionage, targeted killings, and battlefield awareness. From humble beginnings as makeshift remote-controlled planes to today's autonomous hunting machines, the rise of drone warfare represents perhaps the most significant revolution in intelligence operations since the satellite. The story begins not with advanced technology, but with desperation. During the War of Attrition, 1967 to 1970, Egyptian missile batteries inflicted heavy casualties on Israeli forces, lacking the United States satellite capabilities and unable to risk manned reconnaissance flights over well-defended territory. Israeli engineers devised a crude solution: modified radio-controlled toy airplanes equipped with cameras. These early drones, called Mastiffs, provided real-time imagery that helped identify missile sites. Their success sparked what would become the world's most sophisticated drone program. The 1982 Lebanon War proved the concept's military value. Israeli drones successfully mimicked fighter aircraft signatures, tricking Syrian air defenses into activating their radar systems, which were immediately targeted and destroyed. This electronic deception contributed to one of the most lopsided air victories in history, with Syria losing 86 aircraft without shooting down a single Israeli plane. The era of drone-enabled warfare had begun. But the true transformation occurred in the 2000s as drones evolved from surveillance tools to hunting platforms. The catalyst was the Second Intifada, when suicide bombers struck Israeli cities with terrifying frequency. Traditional intelligence methods couldn't provide the real-time tracking needed to prevent attacks. Drones offered a solution. They could hover for days above suspected militant positions, monitoring movements and communications without alerting their targets. The assassination of Hamas leader Ahmed Yassin in 2004 demonstrated the new capabilities. While ultimately completed by manned aircraft, the operation relied on weeks of drone surveillance that mapped Yassin's routines, identified his bodyguards, and found the perfect moment to strike. The message was clear: no one was safe from the silent watchers above. Mossad's involvement in drone operations represents a unique fusion of intelligence and military capabilities. While the military operates the drones, Mossad provides the targeting intelligence, processes the collected data, and often directs the operations based on intelligence priorities. This collaboration has created a seamless cycle. Intelligence guides surveillance. Surveillance generates new intelligence, and both inform operations. The technological evolution has been breathtaking. Early drones provided grainy video. Today's models offer high-definition imagery, infrared vision, signals intelligence collection, and even facial recognition capabilities. The Heron TP can stay aloft for 36 hours, reach altitudes of 45,000 feet, and carry payloads of over 2 tons. Smaller models, like the IAI Birdeye, can be launched by hand and provide platoon-level surveillance. Perhaps the most significant development has been the integration of artificial intelligence. Modern drones don't simply collect data, they analyze it in real time. Algorithms can identify suspicious patterns, a vehicle moving unusually, groups gathering at odd hours, track individuals across multiple cameras, and even predict behavior based on established patterns. This has transformed drones from passive collectors into active partners in intelligence analysis. The ethical implications are profound. Drone operations create psychological distance between operators and targets. While a soldier in the field sees the human cost of their actions, a drone operator might see only pixels on a screen. This distancing effect arguably makes lethal decisions easier on observation, supported by the dramatic increase in targeted killings since drones became prevalent. The 2008-2009 Gaza War Operation Cast Lead demonstrated both the capabilities and controversies of drone warfare. Drones provided constant surveillance over the densely populated territory, enabling precise strikes against militant targets. However, human rights organizations documented numerous civilian casualties, raising questions about the reliability of drone-generated intelligence and the morality of remote killing. The legal framework struggles to keep pace with the technology. International law distinguishes between combat zones and peaceful areas, but drones operate in a gray space. They can conduct lethal operations anywhere, regardless of formal hostilities. The 2010 targeting of a Hamas commander in Dubai using other methods demonstrated that the reach of these capabilities extended far beyond active battlefields. Drone technology has also transformed espionage against Iran's nuclear program. Drones have monitored facilities, tracked scientists, and even allegedly collected air samples to detect nuclear materials. The successful operation to steal Iran's nuclear archive in 2018 reportedly relied on drone surveillance to identify security patterns and plan the infiltration. The psychological impact on monitored populations cannot be overstated. In Gaza and southern Lebanon, the constant buzz of drones overhead has created what psychologists call anticipatory anxiety, the constant fear of imminent strike. This has mental health consequences for entire populations and creates resentment that militant groups exploit for recruitment. Meanwhile, Israel's adversaries have rapidly developed their own drone capabilities. Hezbollah now possesses Iranian-made drones that have penetrated Israeli airspace multiple times. Hamas has built crude but effective drones using commercial components. The technological advantage that Israel once enjoyed is gradually eroding. The future points toward autonomous operations. Israel is developing drones that can operate in swarms, coordinating with each other to surveil large areas, identify targets, and even make engagement decisions without human intervention. This raises alarming questions about the role of human judgment in lethal operations. The 2021 conflict between Israel and Hamas provided a glimpse of this future. Israel used drones not only for surveillance and strikes, but also for electronic warfare, jamming communications and disrupting drone operations. The conflict became the first where both sides deployed drones extensively, offering a preview of coming conflicts. As drone technology becomes more accessible, non-state actors increasingly possess capabilities once limited to major powers. The terrorist group ISIS used commercial drones for surveillance and bomb dropping in Iraq and Syria. Hezbollah's drones increasingly resemble military-grade equipment. The barrier to entry for drone warfare has disappeared. For Mossad, drones represent both opportunity and vulnerability. They provide unprecedented surveillance capabilities, but also create new avenues for attack. The alleged 2018 hacking of Israeli drone feeds by Hezbollah demonstrated that even advanced systems have weaknesses. The rise of drone warfare ultimately represents a paradox. It makes intelligence gathering safer for operatives, but potentially deadlier for civilians. It provides more precise targeting, but also lowers the threshold for using lethal force. It creates more information than ever before, but also more ambiguity about what that information means. As we look to the future, the Silent Watchers will only become more capable, more autonomous, and more ubiquitous. The question is whether humanity can develop the ethical frameworks and legal structures to govern their use before the technology evolves beyond our ability to control it. Next, we will examine how all these capabilities, cyber warfare, drone technology, targeted killings come together in Mossad's ongoing shadow war with Iran. From nuclear facilities to cyber attacks, from diplomatic maneuvers to covert operations, this conflict represents the ultimate test of whether intelligence capabilities can prevent a fundamental shift in the regional balance of power, and whether they can do so without triggering the very war they seek to prevent. The screen glowed in the darkened operations center, showing a live feed from a drone circling 20,000 feet above a neighborhood in Gaza. The target, in an air-conditioned room miles away, the drone operator's finger hovered over the trigger. The mission parameters were clear. Authorization to eliminate a high-value target responsible for developing rockets that threatened Israeli cities. The moral calculation was anything but clear. How does a democratic nation balance security needs against moral imperatives? What ethical frameworks govern operations where the difference between success and tragedy might be a matter of seconds? The story of Mossad is not just one of brilliant operations and technological prowess. It is also a story of constant moral negotiation. In the early years, survival justified nearly any means. Operations like the Wrath of God campaign following the Munich Olympics demonstrated a willingness to pursue targets across borders with minimal regard for collateral damage or international law. The prevailing attitude was summarized by Golda Meir as famous statement, "We can forgive the Arabs for killing our children." This absolutist approach began shifting after the 1973 Lillehammer affair, where Mossad operatives mistakenly killed an innocent Moroccan waiter, Ahmed Bouchiki, believing he was a Black September leader. The very public failure forced Mossad to confront the human cost of its operations and implement more rigorous verification procedures. The incident marked the beginning of a more formalized ethical framework within the agency. The development of precision technologies created new moral dilemmas. While drone warfare and targeted killings reduced collateral damage compared to conventional military operations, they also lowered the threshold for using lethal force. The case of the Iranian nuclear scientists between 2010 to 2012 illustrates these tensions. From Mossad's perspective, these were legitimate military targets, men actively developing weapons that could annihilate Israeli cities. The operations were surgically precise, minimizing collateral damage. Yet critics argued that targeting scientists, however involved in weapons, crossed an ethical line and established. The moral questions become even more complex when examining cyber warfare. The Stuxnet operation successfully delayed Iran's nuclear program without causing any immediate loss of life, a seemingly clean victory. However, the worm eventually spread beyond its intended target, potentially compromising critical infrastructure worldwide. This raised questions about proportionality and the ethics of developing weapons that might cause unintended harm to neutral parties. Mossad's internal ethical guidelines have evolved to address these challenges. Today, every proposed operation undergoes rigorous review by legal advisors, ethicists, and oversight committees. Targets must meet specific criteria. They must represent a clear and present danger. Their elimination must be proportional to the threat, and there must be no feasible, non-lethal alternative. The process is designed to prevent another Lilyhammer while maintaining operational effectiveness. Yet these guidelines cannot eliminate the human element of moral decision-making, the principle of purity of arms, the ethical doctrine followed by the Israeli Defense Forces that emphasizes moral conduct during combat has been adapted by Mossad for intelligence operations. This includes prohibitions against unnecessary force, requirements to minimize civilian casualties, and guidelines for dealing with captured targets. However, the secret nature of intelligence work makes external oversight difficult, relying largely on internal compliance. The 2014 Gaza conflict demonstrated both the improvements and limitations in ethical practices. While Israeli operations showed greater precision than in previous conflicts, human rights organizations still documented significant civilian casualties. The tension between military necessity and moral responsibility remained unresolved, with both sides accusing the other of violating international law. Mossad's ethical challenges extend beyond lethal operations. The agency's cyber capabilities raise questions about digital privacy and sovereignty. When Unit 8200 intercepts communications or penetrates computer systems, it may access information from millions of innocent people. The balance between security needs and privacy rights remains contentious, particularly as capabilities expand. The use of human intelligence sources presents another moral minefield. Mossad frequently recruits agents by exploiting vulnerabilities, financial problems, personal scandals, or family pressures. While effective, does targeted killing create a deterrent effect, or does it inspire more recruits for militant organizations? Does cyber warfare encourage other nations to develop similar capabilities, potentially leading to escalation? There are compelling arguments on both sides, and the evidence remains mixed. The assassination of Hamas leader Ahmed Yassin in 2004 illustrates this complexity. While eliminating a prominent terrorist leader, the operation also made him a martyr and inspired new recruits. Similarly, the killing of Hezbollah Simadah in 2008 removed a skilled military commander, but also led to sophisticated retaliation attacks, and the delegation of lethal decisions to machines. The development of neurotechnologies that could potentially extract information or influence behavior presents entirely new ethical frontiers. The agency has also had to adapt to changing international norms. The globalization of human rights law and the increasing power of international courts have created new accountability mechanisms. Mossad operatives today must consider not just whether an operation is morally justified, but whether it might lead to international legal consequences. The tension between security needs and moral values reflects broader debates within Israeli society. As the country has become more established and secure, public tolerance for ethically questionable operations has decreased. The 2010 Dubai operation, while technically successful, caused public relations damage precisely because it violated international norms in a way that many Israelis found embarrassing. Looking ahead, Mossad faces ethical challenges that previous generations could scarcely imagine. The development of autonomous weapon systems, the potential for genetic targeting, and the emergence of cyber capabilities that could disrupt entire societies. These technologies will require new ethical frameworks and oversight mechanisms. The fundamental question remains: can an intelligence agency charged with protecting a nation's security operate within strict moral boundaries? The evidence suggests that Mossad has made significant progress in formalizing ethical guidelines and implementing oversight. However, the very nature of intelligence work operating in shadows, facing existential threats means that moral compromises will always be part of the calculus. What makes Mossad's ethical journey remarkable is not that the agency has always made the right choices, but that it has continually reflected on its mistakes and evolved its practices. From the early days of anything-goes survivalism to today's carefully reviewed operations, the organization has demonstrated that even in the darkest shadows, moral questions cannot be ignored. Now we'll examine how Mossad's operations have increasingly moved into the digital realm, not just supporting physical operations, but becoming weapons in their own right. From Stuxnet to the hacking of Iran's nuclear archive, cyber capabilities have become central to Israel's security strategy, creating new opportunities and new vulnerabilities in equal measure. The message arrived through an encrypted channel that bypassed normal diplomatic circuits, its contents so sensitive that only 3 people in Israel would ever read it. The Saudi intelligence chief, a man known for his discretion and pragmatism, offered unprecedented cooperation against a common enemy, Iran. For decades, the two nations had operated in shadowy opposition through proxy conflicts, cyber attacks, and intelligence maneuvering. Now, in a secure facility beneath Riyadh, Mossad technicians worked alongside their Saudi counterparts to monitor Iranian communications, sharing algorithms and intelligence in real time. This unlikely partnership represented the new reality of global intelligence work. Alliances formed not through treaties, but through shared threats and mutual interests. How does a small nation maintain global intelligence, reach against threats that span continents? The answer lies in Mossad's intricate web of relationships, some public, some secret, all constantly evolving. From cooperation with superpowers to quiet partnerships with regional rivals, Israel's intelligence relationships tell a story of pragmatism overcoming politics and shared interests transcending historical animosities. The foundation of Mossad's international relationships was laid in unlikely soil, 1950s West Germany. Despite the recent Holocaust, Israel recognized that German scientific expertise and intelligence on Soviet activities were too valuable to ignore. The resulting relationship, kept secret from the Israeli public for years, provided critical intelligence about Soviet weapons shipments to Arab states and helped establish Mossad's technical capabilities. This set a pattern that would repeat for decades. Practical security needs overriding historical grievances. The Six-Day War in 1967 transformed Israel's intelligence relationships. The stunning victory demonstrated Israeli capabilities and made cooperation more attractive to Western agencies. Mossad's penetration of Arab governments and its signals intelligence on Soviet activities became valuable commodities for exchange. The relationship with the CIA evolved from paternalistic support to genuine partnership, though not without tensions. The true test of these relationships came during the campaign against Palestinian groups in the 1970s, when Black September operatives murdered Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics. Mossad discovered the limits of international cooperation. European governments were often more concerned about protecting their relationships with Arab states than helping Israel pursue justice. This forced Mossad to develop independent capabilities, a lesson that would shape its approach for decades. The end of the Cold War reshuffled global alliances and created new opportunities. Former Soviet bloc intelligence services, now lacking funding but retaining extensive networks, became potential partners. Mossad cultivated relationships with services from Poland to Kazakhstan, gaining access to Soviet-era intelligence and establishing new listening posts closer to Middle Eastern targets. The rise of transnational terrorism after 9/11 created strange bedfellows. Mossad found itself sharing intelligence with services from countries that didn't officially recognize Israel's existence. Quiet relationships developed with Gulf states, North African nations, and even some Asian countries, all united by concerns about Islamic extremism. These relationships operated through third countries or used cutouts to maintain deniability. The Stuxnet operation against Iran's nuclear program demonstrated the potential and perils of cooperation. The joint American-Israeli effort combined Mossad's human intelligence and target knowledge with American technical capabilities. However, when the operation was exposed, the political fallout was largely directed at the United States, allowing Israel to maintain some deniability. This pattern of cooperation with plausible deniability became a model for future joint operations. China presents perhaps the most complex relationship in Mossad's portfolio. As China's economic and military power grew, so did its intelligence activities in the Middle East. Mossad walks a delicate line, cooperating on counterterrorism while competing for influence and monitoring Chinese technology transfers to hostile states. The relationship is a constant dance of limited cooperation and careful counterintelligence. The Arab Spring of 2011 temporarily disrupted Mossad's carefully constructed relationships. Long-standing partners in Egypt and Tunisia were overthrown, while chaos in Libya and Syria created new threats. Mossad had to quickly develop relationships with new governments, while maintaining back-channel communications with opposition groups. The period demonstrated the agency's flexibility in adapting to rapidly changing political landscapes. The Syrian civil war created both unprecedented challenges and opportunities. As the Assad regime fought for survival, Mossad developed communication channels with multiple sides, partly to monitor Iranian involvement, partly to prevent chemical weapons proliferation, and partly to influence the conflict's outcome. This multi-level engagement required sophisticated compartmentalization and risk management. The relationship with Russia exemplifies the pragmatic nature of intelligence cooperation. Despite supporting opposing sides in Syria, Israel and Russia developed deconfliction mechanisms to prevent accidental clashes. Mossad maintains open channels with Russian intelligence, exchanging information about terrorist threats while competing in other areas. This relationship operates in parallel with and sometimes contrary to Israel's close ties with the United States. The digital revolution has transformed intelligence relationships. Mossad's Unit 8200 has become a valuable partner for agencies seeking to enhance their cyber capabilities. These digital relationships often bypass traditional diplomatic channels, creating new opportunities for cooperation, but also new vulnerabilities. The 2010 Stuxnet operation demonstrated how cyber cooperation could achieve physical effects, while the 2017 hacking of Qatar's news agency showed how cyber operations could strain relationships. The campaign against Iran's nuclear program has been the ultimate test of Mossad's relationship management. The agency has had to simultaneously work with the United States on technical operations, coordinate with European allies on sanctions enforcement, develop quiet relationships with Gulf states worried about Iranian expansion, and maintain back channels to Tehran itself. This multi-level diplomatic intelligence effort represents one of the most complex relationship management challenges in intelligence history. The emergence of private intelligence companies has added another layer to Mossad's global web. Firms like Black Cube, founded by former Mossad officers, operate in a legal gray area, conducting operations that official agencies cannot undertake. These relationships provide deniability, but also create risks when operations are exposed. The normalization agreements with Arab states, known as the Abraham Accords, have transformed some of Mossad's covert relationships into overt partnerships. What were once back-channel communications are now formal intelligence sharing arrangements. This has improved efficiency, but also created new challenges regarding information protection and source security. Looking ahead, several trends will shape Mossad's international relationships. The rise of artificial intelligence is creating new opportunities for technical cooperation, while raising concerns about technological leakage. Great power competition between the United States and China forces smaller powers to navigate carefully between competing blocs. Climate change and pandemics are creating new arenas for intelligence cooperation beyond traditional security concerns. The fundamental challenge remains the same: how to maintain independence while leveraging partnerships, how to share enough to gain cooperation while protecting sources and methods, and how to balance immediate operational needs against long-term relationship building. Mossad's success has lain in its ability to maintain multiple, sometimes contradictory relationships simultaneously, always guided by Israel's national interests rather than ideological consistency. Now we will examine how all these capabilities and relationships come together in Mossad's ongoing shadow war with Iran. From nuclear facilities to cyber attacks, from diplomatic maneuvers to covert operations, this conflict represents the ultimate test of whether intelligence capabilities can prevent a fundamental shift in the regional balance of power, and whether they can do so without triggering the very war they seek to prevent. The surveillance team in Oslo was certain. The man they had been tracking for weeks fit the description perfectly. Similar build, same Mediterranean complexion, comparable age to their target. Every movement pattern reinforced their conviction: the cautious route to work, the constant vigilance, the meetings with Middle Eastern-looking associates. On July 21, 1973, they made their move. As Ahmed Boushiki walked home with his pregnant wife, two Mossad operatives approached from behind and fired 8 bullets into his body. Only when Norwegian police arrested the team did the devastating truth emerge. They had killed an innocent Moroccan waiter with no connection to terrorism whatsoever. How does the world's most feared intelligence agency recover from catastrophic failure? What happens when meticulous planning meets human error? When arrogance overrides caution? When the hunters become the hunted? The story of Mossad's failures is not just about operational mishaps, it's about how an organization learns from disaster, adapts under pressure, and sometimes fails to learn at all. The Lillehammer Affair of 1973 stands as Mossad's most public failure, but it was far from the first. The agency's early years were marked by operational amateurism that sometimes bordered on recklessness. In 1954, the Lavon affair saw Israeli agents caught attempting to bomb Western targets in Egypt, to blame local radicals, an operation so poorly planned that it resulted in diplomatic catastrophe and the resignation of Israel's defense minister. What made Lilyhammer different was its sheer avoidability. The operation violated multiple core intelligence principles: rushed identification process, inadequate background checking, operating in a friendly country with efficient law enforcement, and using insufficiently trained personnel. The aftermath was devastating. 6 agents captured, Mossad's methods exposed in open court, and international sympathy evaporating overnight. Yet, Lilyhammer also demonstrated Mossad's capacity for institutional learning. The disaster prompted sweeping reforms, enhanced verification procedures, better training for field operatives, stricter oversight of assassination authorizations, and improved psychological screening. The agency established a Devil's Advocate cell tasked with challenging operational Mensa, direct response to the groupthink that doomed the Norway operation. The 1980s brought different failures rooted in technological arrogance. Operation Moses, the 1984 evacuation of Ethiopian Jews, was compromised when a junior agent bragged about the mission to a journalist. The resulting publicity forced Sudan to halt the airlift, stranding thousands. The lesson: no amount of technical brilliance can overcome human carelessness. The 1990s revealed vulnerabilities in Mossad's traditional strengths: human intelligence. The 1997 attempt to kill Hamas leader Khalid Mashal in Amman using a nerve agent represented multiple failures: poor operational security, inadequate contingency planning, and disastrous political miscalculation. When agents were captured, Israel was forced to provide the antidote to save Mashal's life and release dozens of prisoners, including the movement's founder, to free its operatives. The new millennium introduced cyber vulnerabilities. In 2010, the Dubai assassination of Mahmoud al-Mabou was technically successful, but operationally catastrophic. Mossad's use of forged passports from allied nations strained diplomatic relations and exposed its methods through security camera footage. The operation revealed excessive confidence in technological solutions and underestimation of other nations' forensic capabilities. Perhaps the most significant failure is one the public rarely sees: the inability to prevent attacks despite adequate intelligence. The 1972 Munich massacre occurred despite warnings about a possible attack. The 1995 assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin happened despite security services possessing information about threats from Jewish extremists. These failures highlight the eternal intelligence challenge. Collecting information is useless without the ability to interpret and act on it effectively. The psychological impact of failure within Mossad is profound. Former operatives describe an institutional culture that is simultaneously supportive of those who make honest mistakes and ruthless toward those who violate core principles. Failed operations lead to intense debriefings, not to assign blame, but to understand systemic weaknesses. The agency's famous motto, "Where no wise guidance is, the people fall." But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety, is taken seriously in failure analysis. Mossad's adaptation patterns reveal much about its institutional character. Technical failures lead to technical solutions. The Dubai exposure resulted in investment in better disguise technology and digital forensics countermeasures. Human intelligence failures produce better training. The Mashal operation led to enhanced emergency extraction protocols. Political miscalculations create better consultation mechanisms. Major operations now require broader political review. Some failures, however, suggest deeper institutional blind spots. The repeated underestimation of Palestinian political movements, from ignoring early PLO capabilities to misreading Hamas's popular appeals, suggests difficulty understanding ideological adversaries. The consistent overestimation of military solutions to political problems indicates a persistent bias toward action over diplomacy. The cyber realm has introduced new failure modes. The Stuxnet worm, while successful, eventually escaped its target and was reverse-engineered by adversaries. This created blowback. Iran and other nations developed enhanced cyber capabilities, using knowledge gained from analyzing the Israeli-American weapon. The operation demonstrated the double-edged nature of cyber warfare. Capabilities, once deployed, cannot be recalled and might be turned against their creators. The most dangerous failures are those the public never learns about. The operations stopped at the last moment due to cold feet or changed circumstances. The agents extracted seconds before exposure. The intelligence coups that turned out to be sophisticated deception campaigns. These near misses sometimes teach more valuable lessons than public failures, because they allow for correction without catastrophic consequences. Mossad's response to failure follows a consistent pattern: initial secrecy, careful investigation, implementation of reforms, and eventual limited acknowledgement. The agency understands that while failure is inevitable in intelligence work, how an organization responds determines whether it grows stronger or repeats mistakes. The changing nature of threats ensures that new types of failures will emerge. Artificial intelligence operations might produce unexpected outcomes through algorithmic bias. Cyber weapons could cause collateral damage in interconnected systems. Autonomous drones might make mistaken identifications. The challenge is building systems that can learn from failures that haven't happened yet. What makes Mossad's relationship with failure unique is its transparency within the intelligence world. Unlike some services that hide mistakes, Mossad analyzes and occasionally shares lessons with trusted partners, recognizing that all intelligence agencies face similar challenges. This professional honesty has enhanced its reputation even when specific operations failed. The agency's resilience in the face of failure stems from its institutional memory. Mossad maintains extensive archives of both successful and failed operations, with junior analysts regularly studying past mistakes. This continuous learning process creates an organization that becomes more sophisticated with each generation, even as new threats emerge that old lessons cannot address. As Mossad faces future challenges, from quantum computing to genetic warfare to artificial intelligence, its ability to manage failure will determine its effectiveness more than any individual technological capability. The organizations that thrive in the intelligence world are not those that never fail, but those that fail intelligently, learning quickly, adapting thoroughly, and remembering lessons across generations. Now we will see how all these elements, successes, failures, adaptations, and relationships come together in Mossad's ongoing shadow war with Iran. From nuclear facilities to cyber attacks, from diplomatic maneuvers to covert operations, this conflict represents the ultimate test of whether intelligence capabilities can prevent a fundamental shift in the regional balance of power. The silver screen flickers to life with a familiar archetype: the stoic Mossad agent, moving through shadowy corridors with superhuman competence, eliminating threats with cold precision, always one step ahead of both enemies and allies. This Hollywood portrayal, from Steven Spielberg's Munich to the Amazon series Tehran, shapes global perceptions of Israel's intelligence service. But somewhere between the myth and the reality lies a more complex truth. Mossad carefully cultivates its own legend, understanding that perception can be as powerful as any weapon in its arsenal. How does a secret intelligence agency manage its public image while maintaining operational secrecy? What happens when myth becomes a strategic asset and liability? The story of Mossad's relationship with media and popular culture reveals an organization acutely aware that its reputation affects everything from recruitment to deterrence to international cooperation. The myth-making began early. In the 1960s, Mossad's successful capture of Adolf Eichmann provided the template. The daring operation, conducted with clinical precision, the dramatic courtroom conclusion, the narrative of justice pursued across continents. The agency cooperated selectively with journalists, emphasizing certain details while obscuring others, creating a story that served both Israeli morale and international perception. Books like The Mossad by Michael Bar-Zohar and films like Operation Thunderbolt portrayed the agency as uniquely capable and ruthless. This period coincided with actual operational successes: the Entebbe rescue, the Wrath of God campaign that seemed to validate the legend. The agency learned that a fearsome reputation could deter enemies and encourage potential sources to cooperate. But the Lillehammer affair in 1973 provided a crucial corrective. The botched assassination in Norway exposed Mossad's fallibility and generated overwhelmingly negative press. For the first time, the agency faced widespread international criticism and had to develop crisis management strategies. The experience taught Mossad that while controlled media exposure could be beneficial, uncontrolled exposure could be devastating. The 1980s introduced a new challenge: former operatives writing memoirs. Viktor Ostrowski's 1990 book, By Way of Deception, caused particular concern, allegedly revealing operational methods and sources. The agency learned that in the information age, secrets could be compromised not just by foreign intelligence services, but by its own former employees. The digital revolution transformed the media landscape completely. Social media created both opportunities and threats. Mossad could now monitor public sentiment in real time, but also faced instant global scrutiny of its operations. The 2010 Dubai assassination demonstrated this new reality. Security camera footage went viral within hours, and facial recognition technology identified alleged operatives through social media mining. The agency established its own social media presence in 2020, posting carefully curated content that blends patriotism, mystery, and recruitment messaging. Their Twitter account features dramatic videos and cryptic messages that reinforce the agency's image of technological sophistication and operational daring. The entertainment industry presents particular opportunities and challenges, ensuring portrayals that generally serve Israeli interests. Series like Foda and Tehran, while fictional, benefit from technical advice that makes them feel authentic while maintaining narrative control. Academic analysis has become another battleground for perception. Mossad closely monitors scholarly works about Israeli intelligence, sometimes engaging through intermediaries to correct what it perceives as inaccuracies. The agency understands that academic narratives can influence policy decisions in foreign capitals and international organizations. The relationship with Israeli media is particularly complex. Mossad has learned to use this system to its advantage, occasionally leaking information to achieve strategic objectives while maintaining deniability. Recruitment messaging reveals how carefully Mossad manages its image. Campaigns emphasize technological sophistication, global impact, and patriotic service while downplaying the moral ambiguities and personal costs of intelligence work. The agency presents itself as an elite technological organization rather than a paramilitary force, reflecting both reality and strategic positioning. The psychological impact of this manufactured image affects Mossad itself. Former operatives describe the pressure of living up to the legendary reputation, the fear of failure in an organization that publicly projects infallibility. This creates both high standards and occasional risk-aversion operatives might avoid potentially valuable operations because the reputational cost of failure seems too high. International perceptions vary significantly by region. In Western countries, Mossad is often portrayed as competent, if sometimes ruthless. In Middle Eastern media, it's frequently depicted as omnipotent and malicious. These perceptions affect everything from diplomatic relations to the agency's ability to operate covertly in different regions. The assassination of Iranian nuclear scientists between 2010 and 2012 demonstrated Mossad's sophisticated understanding of narrative warfare. Each operation was designed to send multiple messages. To Iranian scientists, you're not safe. To the Iranian government, we can reach your most protected assets. And to the international community, Israel will act alone if necessary. The operations were technically deniable but semantically clear. The cyber realm has added new dimensions to perception management. Mossad's alleged involvement in the Stuxnet attack created an image of technological sophistication that serves as both deterrent and recruitment tool. The 2018 operation to steal Iran's nuclear archive reinforced this image while providing tangible intelligence benefits. When Mossad fails, as all intelligence agencies must, the gap between reputation and reality seems particularly dramatic. The agency's perceived omnipotence makes setbacks appear more significant than they might for other services. And enemies can score propaganda victories by exposing Mossad failures. The relationship with truth is necessarily complex for any intelligence agency. Mossad operates in what former director Meir Dagan called the twilight between truth and lies. This extends to public perception. The agency sometimes promotes exaggerated accounts of its capabilities to deter enemies, while downplaying other capabilities to maintain operational security. Looking ahead, new technologies are transforming perception management. Deepfake technology could allow Mossad to create convincing false narratives about operations or adversaries. Artificial intelligence can generate disinformation at scale. These capabilities offer new tools for influence operations, but also create risks when others deploy them against Israeli interests. The fundamental challenge remains balancing transparency necessary for democratic accountability with secrecy required for operational effectiveness. Mossad exists in a democratic society with free press and parliamentary oversight, yet must operate in shadows. The agency understands that in the information age, battles are won not just through operational success, but through narrative control. The myth of Mossad, carefully cultivated over decades, has become an asset as valuable as any agent network or cyber weapon. Failures, adaptations, relationships, and perceptions come together in Mossad's ongoing shadow war with Iran. From nuclear facilities to cyber attacks, from diplomatic maneuvers to covert operations, this conflict represents the ultimate test of whether intelligence capabilities can prevent a fundamental shift in the regional balance of power. The explosion that killed Mohsen Fakhrizadeh on November 27, 2020, did more than eliminate Iran's top nuclear scientist, sent seismic waves across the Middle East that reverberated through presidential palaces, intelligence headquarters, and militant safe houses. In Riyadh, security officials quietly updated their contingency plans. In Damascus, Hezbollah commanders accelerated their counterintelligence protocols. In Abu Dhabi, diplomats recalibrated their regional strategy. Every capital from Ankara to Sana'a understood the same unsettling truth. If Israel could reach Iran's most protected scientist on a highway outside Tehran, no one was truly safe. How does the Middle East respond to an intelligence service that operates with such audacity and impunity? What happens when Mossad's actions force regional powers to choose between confrontation, accommodation, or covert cooperation? The story of Mossad's relationship with the broader Middle East reveals an intricate dance of deterrence, imitation, and occasional collaboration that defies simple narratives. The Arab Spring of 2011 fundamentally reshaped regional perceptions of Mossad. As traditional authoritarian regimes faltered, Israel's intelligence capabilities suddenly appeared more valuable, more threatening, depending on one's position. For Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, Mossad represented a potential ally against Iranian expansionism and Islamist movements. For Turkey under Erdogan, it became both a rival and occasional partner in combating Kurdish separatists. For Iran, it remained the little Satan, a constant threat requiring relentless countermeasures. Iran's response to Mossad operations has evolved through distinct phases. Initially, the Islamic Republic treated Israeli intelligence as a conventional threat, increasing physical security, purging potential double agents, and relying on traditional counterintelligence. The 2010 Stuxnet attack revealed the limitations of this approach, forcing a fundamental rethinking. Iran subsequently invested billions in cyber capabilities, establishing the Iranian cyber army and developing sophisticated hacking tools that would later target Saudi Aramco and other regional adversaries. The assassination campaign against nuclear scientists between 2010 to 2012 prompted another adaptation. Iran created elaborate security protocols for scientists, including dedicated security details, randomized travel routes, and secure residential compounds. More significantly, they began developing asymmetric responses, using proxy forces to attack Israeli interests abroad, rather than attempting direct retaliation against well-defended Israeli targets. Hezbollah's relationship with Mossad represents perhaps the most sophisticated adversary response. The Lebanese group has developed counterintelligence capabilities that rival many national intelligence services. Their methods include rigorous vetting of new members, compartmentalized operations, advanced encryption, and regular security sweeps for surveillance devices. After the 2008 assassination of Imad Magnia, Hezbollah established a dedicated counter-Mossad unit that has successfully identified and eliminated several Israeli intelligence networks in Lebanon. The Gulf Arab states have responded with a more pragmatic approach. Despite public hostility, several have established back-channel communications with Israeli intelligence. These relationships, focused on countering Iranian influence and monitoring Islamist groups, intensified after the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. The collaboration typically involves third countries, often Jordan, as intermediaries, and focuses on specific intelligence sharing rather than broad cooperation. Turkey's relationship reflects the region's complexities. Under Erdogan, public rhetoric has grown increasingly hostile, particularly after the 2010 Gaza flotilla incident. Yet intelligence cooperation continues regarding Kurdish militants and other shared concerns. This duality, public condemnation and private coordination, characterizes many regional relationships with Mossad. The Palestinian response has evolved from direct confrontation to more sophisticated methods. Hamas and Islamic Jihad have invested heavily in cyber capabilities, drone technology, and counterintelligence. The discovery of multiple Mossad surveillance networks in the West Bank between 2018 to 2021 prompted serious organizational reforms, including better vetting procedures and enhanced operational security. Egypt represents a special casa, former enemy turned crucial partner. The relationship built during the Mubarak era and maintained after the Arab Spring focuses on combating Islamist militants in Sinai and monitoring Gaza. Egyptian intelligence provides Mossad with valuable human intelligence while receiving technological assistance and political support in return. Jordan maintains the region's most complex relationship with Israeli intelligence. Publicly, the kingdom must consider its Palestinian population's sentiments. Privately, cooperation is extensive and multifaceted, from monitoring Islamist groups to coordinating West Bank security. The relationship is managed through discrete channels and deniable protocols that allow both sides to maintain plausible distance. The Syrian civil war created unexpected dynamics. As Iran established military presence in Syria, Mossad intensified operations against weapons transfers and infrastructure projects. This prompted sophisticated responses. Iran began using civilian airlines for weapons transfers, embedding military facilities within civilian areas, and developing better deception techniques. Russia's involvement added another layer, forcing Mossad to develop deconfliction mechanisms while continuing operations. The normalization agreements, known as the Abraham Accords, fundamentally transformed some relationships. The UAE and Bahrain moved from covert cooperation to overt intelligence sharing, including joint training exercises and technology transfers. This shift required Mossad to adapt its methods, operating more openly while maintaining security for sensitive sources and methods. Regional media portrayals of Mossad reveal underlying anxieties. Arabic language media often depicts the agency as omnipotent and malicious, a narrative that serves both genuine concern and political convenience. This portrayal creates psychological pressure on regional intelligence services to demonstrate effectiveness against the perceived Israeli threat. The arms race in intelligence technology has accelerated regional development. Countries across the Middle East have invested in surveillance systems, cyber capabilities, and drone technology, often citing Mossad's capabilities as justification. This has created a paradox. Mossad's effectiveness has spurred regional competitors to develop capabilities that may eventually challenge Israeli superiority. The human dimension remains crucial. Mossad's ability to recruit agents across the region forces continuous counterintelligence investments. Arab services have become increasingly sophisticated in detecting and turning Israeli agents sometimes running double-agent operations that create complex deception scenarios. Looking ahead, several trends will shape regional responses. The development of artificial intelligence favors technologically advanced services like Mossad, but also enables automated monitoring that could reduce human intelligence vulnerabilities. Climate change and water scarcity may create new intelligence priorities that transcend traditional security concerns. The fundamental question remains: can Mossad maintain its qualitative advantage as regional services improve their capabilities? The agency's success has always relied on innovation rather than size, staying ahead through technological advancement and operational creativity. This approach becomes increasingly challenging as knowledge diffuses and regional powers invest heavily in their intelligence capabilities. Some responses involve imitation, adopting Israeli methods and technologies. Others involve innovation, developing asymmetric approaches that exploit different strengths. The result is an increasingly sophisticated intelligence landscape where advantages are temporary and adaptation is constant. What makes this regional dynamic unique is how it transcends traditional diplomatic relationships. Intelligence services sometimes cooperate even when their governments are formally hostile. They compete even when their nations are officially at peace. This shadow world operates by its own rules and rhythms, a hidden dimension of Middle Eastern politics that rarely surfaces in public discourse. Next, we will examine how all these elements, operations, failures, adaptations, relationships, and regional dynamics converge in Mossad's ongoing campaign against Iran's nuclear program. From cyber attacks to assassinations, from diplomatic pressure to covert action, this multidimensional conflict represents the ultimate test of whether intelligence capabilities can shape strategic outcomes in the world's most volatile region. The old man walks slowly through the Hall of Names at Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust memorial. His hand trembles slightly as it passes over the photographs of victims. He remembers when there were no names, only numbers tattooed on arms, only fragments of families scattered across continents. As a young operative in Mossad's earliest days, he had helped hunt those who had engineered the genocide. Now, decades later, he understands that the real mission was always about giving names back to the nameless agency, back to the powerless, a future back to those who had been denied one. What is the true legacy of an organization that operates in shadows? How do we measure the value of operations never acknowledged, disasters never revealed, and peace preserved through actions that can never be celebrated? The story of Mossad is not just about operations and technologies, it is about the fundamental questions of how a nation survives in a dangerous world, and what price it is willing to pay for that survival. From its makeshift beginnings in borrowed apartments, Mossad has evolved into perhaps the world's most technologically sophisticated intelligence service. Yet its greatest strength remains the same: the ability to adapt to changing threats while staying true to its core mission, protecting Jewish lives and ensuring Israel's security. Operations like the capture of Adolf Eichmann demonstrated that Israel could project power globally and pursue justice relentlessly. The message was clear: those who threatened Jewish lives would find no sanctuary in distance or time. While controversial, this approach set standards for counterterrorism that many nations would later emulate, for better or worse. The technological revolution of the 1980s and 1990s saw satellite surveillance, drone operations, and biometric tracking. The agency's ability to stay ahead of the technological curve often, despite limited budgets, reflects its culture of innovation and willingness to embrace unconventional thinking. The campaign against Iran's nuclear program represents Mossad's most significant contemporary achievement. Through a combination of cyber attacks, sabotage, intelligence gathering, and targeted operations, this multi-dimensional campaign has required every tool in Mossad. Yet Mossad's legacy is not just about successes. The failures, Lilyhammer, the Mashal operation, the Dubai assassination, reveal an organization constantly struggling with the limits of power and knowledge. How do we judge operations that save lives through actions that violate international norms? What moral calculus justifies killing scientists to prevent potential future weapons development? There are no easy answers, only the difficult recognition that in intelligence work, moral clarity is often the first casualty. Mossad's relationship with Israeli society reflects the nation's own evolution from besieged startup to technological powerhouse. The agency has shaped Israel's sense of itself as a nation that relies on brains rather than size, that punches above its weight, that refuses to be victimized again. But this relationship has also created expectations and pressures that sometimes distort both policy and operations. But they have also fueled arms races in intelligence capabilities, inspired imitation by non-state actors, and sometimes created cycles of retaliation that undermine long-term stability, creating new challenges for the future. The technological legacy is particularly significant. Mossad's development of cyber warfare capabilities has changed global security calculations. The Stuxnet operation demonstrated that cyber attacks could cause physical damage to critical infrastructure, a paradigm shift that nations worldwide are still grappling with. The agency's work in drone technology, surveillance systems, and artificial intelligence has similarly pushed boundaries and set precedents. Perhaps Mossad's most important legacy is what hasn't happened. Nuclear weapons used against Israeli cities, major terrorist attacks prevented, wars avoided through timely intelligence. The nature of intelligence success is that the greatest victories are often invisible, the disasters that never occur, the attacks that never happen, the wars that never begin. Looking ahead, Mossad faces challenges that previous generations could scarcely imagine. Artificial intelligence is transforming both the methods and targets of intelligence work. Climate change is creating new security threats and migration patterns. Great power competition is reshaping global alliances. The very nature of warfare is evolving towards cyber and space domains where traditional rules may not apply. The human dimension remains both Mossad's greatest advantage and its greatest vulnerability. No technology can replace the insight provided by a well-placed agent or the intuition of an experienced operative. The moral questions will only grow more complex. How should intelligence agencies respond to autonomous weapons systems? What rules govern cyber operations that might disrupt civilian infrastructure? Mossad's legacy is ultimately the story of modern Israel itself, a nation forged in trauma, sustained through innovation, and constantly wrestling with the tension between its democratic values and security needs. As the old man leaves Yad Vashem, he pauses before the memorial to the victims who have no graves. He thinks about the operations he can never discuss, the lives he helped save, the choices he still questions decades later. The shadows in which he operated were not just physical, but moral places where right and wrong blurred into shades of gray that still haunt him. This is the ultimate legacy of Mossad, not the daring operations or technological marvels, but the human beings who carry the weight of decisions made in darkness. Their stories, mostly untold, largely unrecognized, form the true history of an organization that has shaped Israel's destiny while operating largely out of sight. The work continues, the shadows deepen, and the moral calculations grow more complex. But the fundamental mission remains unchanged: to ensure that there are never again nameless victims, never again powerless Jews, never again a future denied. However history judges Mossad's methods, this purpose will endure as long as the Jewish people face threats in a dangerous world. The Mossad history closes here, but the story never ends. New threats emerge, new technologies develop, new operatives take up the burden. The legacy of shadows continues to unfold, written in actions that will remain secret for decades, in choices whose full consequences may never be known. The only certainty is that the balance between security and morality, between action and restraint, between shadow and light, will remain the eternal challenge, not just for Mossad, but for all who believe that some things are worth protecting, no matter the cost. In this video, we have walked in the shadows where history is truly made. We've witnessed the birth of a secret agency from the ashes of genocide, the audacious operations that defined a nation's resolve, and the silent wars fought in cyberspace and on deserted streets. We've seen brilliance and failure, moral courage and impossible choices. The story of Mossad is the story of modern Israel itself, a relentless, often painful quest for security in a world where survival is never guaranteed. It's a legacy written not in public declarations, but in covert actions whose full truth may never be known. This journey is just the beginning. The world of espionage is evolving faster than ever. Right now, new battles are being fought over artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and genetic engineering. The next chapter of shadow warfare is being written, and it will be more secretive and more powerful than anything we've covered. If you don't want to miss what happens next, you need to take action now. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Why subscribe? Because this isn't just history, this is an ongoing story. Our next series is already in production. You will not see this content anywhere else. But before you go, we need to know. What was the most shocking revelation for you? Was it the truth behind Operation Wrath of God? The terrifying precision of the Stuxnet cyber attack? Or the human cost paid by Mossad's own operatives? Let us know in the comments below. Tell us where you rewatching from and what time it is. It's incredible to see this global community of intelligence enthusiasts coming together. Your engagement is what allows us to declassify these stories for you. This is not goodbye. This is just the end of the beginning. The shadows are waiting. We'll see you in the next mission.